Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here as always to talk about stuff. Kind of a light week this week. I would call it, in fact, the calm before the storm.
Yes, because Tuesday, there's a hell of a storm coming.
There is. I mean, there's Fallout 4, and that's the big one. And I think everyone on Earth is playing Fallout 4, apparently.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll be fun, and we'll have more to talk about that next week, obviously.
Yep.
But there's also on the Xbox One Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is the sequel to one of my very favorite games of the last couple of years. So I am very excited to see what Crystal Dynamics has done with that one. And then from there on out, it's just like a race to the end of the year with lots more movies and lots more video games.
And then Star Wars comes out, and
Yeah.
I think the universe ends. Based on the marketing, I'm pretty sure there is nothing that exists after that Star Wars movie comes out.
Yes. No, there is. It's definitely we are not wanting for topics for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But it's kind of nice that we're doing a slightly slower episode this week. I mean, we're going to talk about Doctor Who, and in part, I think this is an episode of Doctor Who that demands enough discussion that I think that's enough for an episode.
Yeah.
Quick spoiler-free reaction, Sean.
It's fucking awesome. Like, this season is still, like, it's really amazing. This season is seriously past the point that it can't be a bad season. Like, even if the rest of the episodes are, like, some of the worst episodes Doctor Who has ever had, this would still be a really great season.
Yes.
And that's kind of insane.
We're at the point where we've just kind of had... I mean, it's 8 episodes, 4 two-parters, I guess, so just like 4 stone-cold classic stories to me.
Yeah.
And this was probably my favorite of them this week's. And, yeah, cannot wait to talk about it in depth. If you haven't seen it, get on that. It is so good.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So
The Zygons have probably the best track record of any Doctor Who monster, somehow.
they've been in 3 excellent stories.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of crazy. I don't understand how they did it. But, good on you, Zygons.
Yes, you beat the Daleks.
Handily.
Yeah.
Handily.
I love looking through the list of William Hartnell stories and seeing just how many Dalek stories there were.
Yeah. I mean, the Daleks are what made the show take off originally, so the
Right.
Dalek mania of the early 60s is a real thing. And,
I just love it. It's like Beatlemania, only with weird robots.
I mean, the second Doctor Who movie that they made in the 60s with Peter Cushing playing the Doctor, or I should say Peter Cushing playing Doctor Who, does not have Doctor Who in the title. It is, for the first one, it's Doctor Who and the Daleks. The second one is the Dalek Invasion of Earth, like 2156 AD or whatever it is.
That's hilarious. All right, so we're going to talk about that, but let's see. We've got some other odds and ends on the show today, including I'm going to review Spectre and talk a little James Bond, because why not? This is the time to do it.
Yeah.
And some other things. But first, random stuff. Sean, what's up?
I've been playing a lot of Halo, and not specifically Halo 5. I have been digging into that a little bit here and there, but specifically I think it was writing the review for Halo 5 got me thinking so much about particularly Halo 1 in terms of the campaign stuff, because I was just thinking about sort of like contrasting the design elements and just thinking about that, which just made me want to play Halo 1's campaign a lot. And then luckily that Master Chief Collection came out last year, so I played through all of the first Halo's campaign, and I'm mostly through Halo 2's now, because I had also never played the anniversary version of Halo 2 when the Master Chief Collection originally came out, so that's kind of my first time seeing that updated version, and it's been fun. Halo 1's campaign, still fucking awesome. It's still, like...
It never loses a beat.
Yeah,
it's
so still one of the best first-person shooter campaigns I've ever played. Like, I think it is the best Halo campaign, although I like Halo 3 as a package more.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Halo 1...
And Halo,
so good. It's so good.
And what's so funny is that I think there was a point maybe 5 years ago where I wouldn't have necessarily said that about Halo 1. But with every passing year, not that it wasn't good, but just that it wasn't my favorite. But with every passing year, the further we get away from that game being made, the more it seems like a great game to me, because it just holds up and holds up. And if anything, when you put it up against modern games, it seems better and better and better. Because it is just is so confident in what it does, it is so clear in what it does, and it just never ages an ounce for me.
Yeah.
And I love a lot of the other Halo campaigns. I mean, as we've said, there have been 7 Halo campaigns, and 5 of them to me are great. One of them's kind of rough, and one of them's awful.
Yeah.
And, so you can look at like Halo Reach and Halo 3 and ODST, and those are great games.
Yes.
But Halo 1 is still kind of in this other echelon for me.
Yeah, I think it really is it's like the structure of the campaign, and it's the novelty of each of the missions, and it's such a tight campaign, and introduces new elements so frequently and knows when to introduce something new, knows when to change up the pacing. I mean, that the middle beat of the 343 Guilty Spark level when they introduced the Flood is still, I think, one of like the best moments in video games for me, just in terms of like what it does for the story of that game, and then also what it does for shifting everything about that game into its final act is so profound. And there's pacing in video games, I think, is something that we talk about a lot because it's something that is so often done so poorly, and it's really remarkable to go back to a game made in 2001, which is 14 years ago now, and see that it nailed the pacing of its campaign in a way that maybe no other first-person shooter campaign has matched. In my memory, I can't think of any one of other specific first-person shooter campaign that has a pacing as solid as Halo 1's.
No, I mean, it is 9 levels, I guess 10, that are just, like I said with Dr. just stone-cold classics, one after the other.
Yeah.
It's kind of a perfect game. And I guess it depends on your thoughts on like things like the library, but even that I think is such an interesting change.
Yeah, but in the library, it serves a really important function in the overall scope of that game. Like, taken out as its own as a level, the library's frustrating, and I think the original release of the game, the library, is far more frustrating than the Anniversary Edition, because the Anniversary Edition spices up the visuals in a way that makes it not quite as monotonous as it originally was. But still, I mean, the library is the only level in all of Halo 1 where you only fight the Flood and that's it. Every other level in the game, you either fight only the Covenant or Covenant and Flood. And so it's like, there's something about that with the library where it's just, you are marching through like piles of Flood to reach the end, and it is a gauntlet, and it is a trial for you.
Yeah.
And that's like what it's designed to be, so I think it functions as intention.
I mean, Halo 1 is obviously very different than shooters today. You can't run, you don't look down the sights on everything, all those different little things. But it still in some ways feels ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Because I think it's out of its time. It transcends its time. It is a transcendent kind of work of video game art, and I think always will be.
I agree.
Also, what I want to say, you mentioned the Anniversary Edition.
Yeah.
I love the Anniversary Edition of Halo 1. I still do. And like I think the Master Chief Collection, further remastered it and added 60 frames per second. It's just gorgeous. And I like the Anniversary makeover on Halo 2, but it's not nearly as interesting to me. I think what they did with Halo 1, it like honors the original game, but also it takes so many interesting visual risks and does so many creative things with it.
And then like Halo 1 just needed it more because the textures in that game are so flat. That like I said, there are whole levels like the library that, like, it is just one big, long, gray texture. It's just what that entire level looks like. And so, spicing it up, adding, like, different lighting and stuff like that's very important. Yeah, and Halo 2 is one that, like, there are parts now that I'm playing through the Halo 2 Anniversary Edition where I've, like, because I like switching back and forth a lot, especially since they made it instantaneous.
It's so fun.
And every once in a while, I will be stuck in original Halo 2 mode and forget that I'm in original Halo 2 and be thinking that I was in Anniversary, and then it's like, oh, no, wait.
They look very similar.
Yeah. And the Anniversary Edition makes some changes to this. I mean, it comprehensively changes all the sound effects in a way that I'm not a super fan of for Halo 2. Like, some of them, I like the new sound effects a lot, but the Halo 1 Anniversary Edition, like, it felt like they made the sound effects more, like just kind of better, but they were still the Halo 1 sound effects.
Yes.
The Halo 2 ones, they have just changed all of the sound effects. I mean, some of them sound really cool, but I have such specific nostalgia around some of those sound effects.
It's the SMG in particular for me.
Yeah.
Because
the SMG, the sword, also has, like, a very particular sound that they've changed completely, and it's not quite the whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Like, I really like... I mean, the sound effects, I think, are kind of objectively better in the Anniversary version. I mean, they're just, like, more complex and more interesting sound effects on their own. But as something that you're going back and playing the original game, there are times that I wish I could just have the updated visuals and then, like, slightly, like, better versions of the original sound effects. Because I want that feel.
But it is kind of... I mean, it is still cool, though, that they went to the trouble of updating the original visuals, too. So if you wanted to, you can just play it the original way and still have it in 60 frames per second and 1080p and all that. And with those sound effects. Like, I do think the Master Chief Collection, it had a really flawed launch and all that.
Yes.
And
to say the
just
least.
horribly, yeah. It's at a point now, I think it is this awesome, just objective video game archiving. I love that it's all there for you now.
I mean, I love it too when it decides to load a level. Because every once in a while...
It doesn't,
It's been better for Halo 2, but for Halo 1, every once in a while I'll try to load up a level. It's just like, nah.
And that's weird.
You're just going to sit at this loading screen for like 3 minutes.
That is an issue I've never had, but I understand it.
Yeah.
They happen. I actually played a lot of Master Chief Collection today because I just got to a point where I was a little fed up with Halo 5 multiplayer and specifically wanted to play something bigger than a tiny little circuit.
Yes.
So I played some SWAT and I played some Big Team Battle with my brother. And good God, did we have fun with Big Team Battle, because that's one of the playlists that is still very well populated on Master Chief Collection, so we were getting in and out of matches. We played a lot of Halo 4 Big Team Battle because people on the Master Chief Collection love them some Halo 4.
Huh.
I don't know why, but if Halo 4 comes up in a multi-game playlist, that's what they pick.
Interesting.
But we still got some Halo 2 and 3 in there also. And Halo 4 Big Team Battle is still really good. It still feels way more like Halo to me than Halo 5 does. And that's just, when you have your vehicles and you have your big maps and you can actually do line of sight shooting and shit, it is so fun. And I also realized, like, SWAT is one of my favorite game types in Halo, just overall. I've always liked that. But in Halo 5, even though Halo 5, as we said last week, it plays really well, and SWAT is technically really tight and good because they have a great battle rifle and all that.
Yeah.
It's always felt kind of flat to me in Halo 5, and then I went back and played some on the Master Chief Collection, so I got some in Halo 3 and Halo 4, and it's so much better. And you know what the difference is? Those maps are bigger enough that it actually matters that you have guns that you can look down the fucking sights with.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. Like, I was playing on a Halo 4 map that is not huge and doesn't need to be, but it was bigger enough than anything in Halo 5. I'm like, oh, right, this is why I loved SWAT back in the day, and I say back in the day, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because you actually felt like it wasn't just you would run up to someone and you would just fire blindly until one of you died, which is all SWAT in Halo 5 is, really. It's very rare you get someone from across the map, I feel like, because even if you are across the map, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, across the map is like 5 feet or something
yes.
on some of them.
So, yeah, it's like so much tighter on that. Like, the DMR has an actual function in other Halo games. It has no purpose being a Halo 5 multiplayer because they've made it the one that has a further sights to look down, and you don't need that. In fact, it's a detriment because you can't see as much of this tiny little map. So anyway, yeah, if you're bummed at Halo 5 multiplayer, the Master Chief Collection multiplayer basically works, and it's great.
Yeah.
So play it.
Although, speaking of Big Team Battle in Halo 5, I don't know if you've seen this news where 343 have said next week is when they're putting Big Team Battle into Halo 5 with 4 maps. But guess what? All 4 maps are Forge maps, and they're basically all remakes or inspired versions of old maps from other Halo games. Like, there's a Headlong one, a Standoff one, a Valhalla one, and I can't remember what the 4th one is.
Okay, those are great maps.
Yes.
And maybe these will be really cool Forge recreations. I don't know. We haven't seen them yet.
Yeah.
But given the flatness of the Forge maps we've seen so far, which look way less interesting than Forge stuff in any of the other Halo games, and just some of the other flatness of Halo 5 in general, I'm really curious if this is going to be that good. And also the fact that they're putting it out with 4 Forge maps makes me think they were not planning on doing it this soon.
Yeah, or maybe some of that, like, this is like, I don't know, I feel like I've looked this up, but I haven't seen any sort of like specific confirmation anywhere. But like, I wonder how many maps, like post-launch release maps, we're going to get that are actually full remade, like 343 made custom asset maps, and how many are just going to be, well, 343 worked with some like famous kind of community member to make a Forge map, and we're going to put that out for free for everyone, which is like,
because they have no way to share Forge maps or anything yet.
Yeah, because we don't have Forge yet, and it's something where you're like, well, you know, that happened with Halo 3 and it happened with Halo Reach, but that was just community people made Forge maps, which then Bungie put into the hopper for various different matchmaking playlists.
It's a fine line, isn't it? Because that was one of my favorite things in 3 and Reach, is it felt like no matter how long you played it, it was always cycling in new stuff, because there were so many great community-made Forge maps, and at the same time, Bungie had supported it with a great bedrock of real maps.
Yes.
And so that was great. But if that's all Halo 5 will wind up being, that's not good.
Yeah, because right now, like, I feel like we talked about this when we talked about Halo 5, but when you go to the map list in Halo 5, it's incredibly deceptive because it looks like there's like 15-something maps, but really there's like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Because they're like, the vast majority of those maps in that map list are either they're slight, like, visual changes to maps that already exist, like the 2 midship ones, or it's like all those breakout maps, which are like the kind of the Tron-looking maps, which are all just Forge maps, which is fine. Like, I'm fine with playing Forge maps. There's no problem with that specifically, but you do need to have enough maps that have unique assets and are like custom designed, because those maps look much better and they tend to play much tighter than Forge maps do because the developers can make whatever they want and need to make with the tools they have.
Right.
That it's like if you end up only playing on Forge maps, it becomes very repetitive and very dull.
Well, yeah. I mean, at this point, I think it's safe to say played a lot more Halo 5 than you. Just the
Probably,
multiplayer.
yeah. I'm sure, because I haven't played almost all this week.
Right, and I've been playing it all week. That's just when I've had time to play a game. That's what I've been playing. So, and I still, the things I said I liked last week, I still really like to love some of the just basic Slayer stuff. But I'm definitely feeling the fatigue so hard, and it's only been 2 weeks, if that. And it really is that map issue, because I played they pulled Orion out completely because they felt the map was broken.
Yeah, because that's the one that everyone hated, yeah.
Yeah, so they pulled it out completely, which means they had to rearrange the playlist a little bit. So if you're playing Slayer, there's basically 3 or 4 maps you see, and I just, today, like I think it was earlier today, I played 4 Slayer matches in a row, and they were all on regret. Every one of them. I really like that map, good map, but could we get another one in there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. We got Empire, great. And then we got the one that's the nighttime version of Empire. Okay.
And then the other problem is that then you realize when they do change the map, like, it's different, but it's still a tiny map.
Yes.
Like, it's not that different. It's not as different as like playing on Guardian in Halo 3 and then playing on like Construct or something, where it's like those maps feel completely different. Like, they play completely differently, and you have to take things, like, completely different things into consideration when you're playing on those 2 maps, whereas every single Halo 5 map is basically a small box or a small circle with, like, different pathways and stuff. I'm obviously simplifying it, but when you boil it down, that is basically what all the maps feel like.
Right. I mean, I was playing that Master Chief Collection multiplayer, and it was amazing to me. There were some Halo 2 and 3 and 4 maps that I didn't even remember I remembered,
Yeah.
And it's just, you get into that, and it's just, the muscle memory kicks in immediately, and I just know those maps. And it's not like I'm thinking about, where do I go find the battle rifle? I just know the map.
Yeah.
And, like, I was especially surprised for that with Halo 4. I got into some Halo 4 stuff, and I'm like, oh, I played more of this game than I thought. But with Halo 5, it's like, I technically have that, I guess, but it's very different. It's not like I'm getting to know these maps in such a deep way that I'm really loving them and they're a part of me. It's just, in part, because I don't know what there really is to know.
Yeah, I mean, it is basically like, here's where the light rifle is, which I've, like, on a couple of maps, I kind of know where, like, a battle rifle is or where a light rifle is, but it's mostly, like, I'm just kind of running around with my pistol.
Mostly it's a circuit, and that's all that it is. But other ones, like, you just play them in different ways in the past. So, and you play them all the same in this one, so I'm really feeling dull after a week or 2.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I'm sure I'll jump into BTB when it launches for Halo 5 and sort of, like, check out those maps and see what it's like, because I feel like I don't have a very good feel on how the vehicle combat stuff actually is in Halo 5, because there's only a couple of times when you get into vehicles in the campaign, and ever since they made the vehicle health change they did in Reach, where vehicles have their own health that's not tied to yours, so they blow up on their own, campaign vehicle sections have never been very good, I feel, because, like, you just can get blown up so easily, especially if you're on the harder difficulties. So, and then on Warzone, getting into vehicles is just a fucking mess, because you have no idea what anti-vehicle weapons are on the map and stuff like that. So I feel every time I've gotten to a vehicle in Warzone, I've basically been blown up instantly.
Yeah. I finally, by the way, today cleaned up every Warzone achievement, so I never have to touch that mode again, and thank fucking Christ, because anyone who says they like that mode is lying. It's not good.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that really killed me on Warzone, where I was giving it a bit of a chance, where I was at a point where I was like, well, at least Warzone is basically, it's a sort of like social playlist, and that would have been in past Halos, where you don't have to think about, oh, I'm being ranked and stuff like that. It's being competitive. I need to actually pay attention. So it's like, well, this is the mode where I can just listen to my podcast or whatever and play some Halo and have some fun that way. And I was trying that, but there was a point where the game was actually pretty close for once in Warzone, which I feel, in my experience, is pretty rare.
It never happens.
Yeah. And there's a part where it's like, okay, then one of the big AI dudes spawned that's worth 150 points. Is like, well, I guess I should go kill that guy, and was killing that guy. And I was actually doing really good because I had a railgun, and it was the Wraith guy, and I got him in a spot where I was just shooting it in the back because I was focusing on someone else. Got it to within basically one shot that would kill it. Then someone else on the enemy team just fired it with a Spartan laser at it and blew it up. When I had done basically 80% of the damage to that guy's health bar, and they get all the points.
That happens all the time.
I was like, oh, wait, so why would I ever attack the boss until his health bar got down to basically nothing and then just hit him with a power weapon? Like, why would you ever spend the time to attack that boss enemy until he was at that point? Because all that matters is who gets the last hit on him that kills him. So you shouldn't. Like, tactically speaking, it is stupid to fight the boss until the boss is almost dead and then get a long-range weapon and get the last hit and then just run away. And that's the only... Like, that is the most... Like, tactically, that is the smartest thing to do. And as soon as I realized that, it's like, why the fuck am I playing this mode? Because clearly I'm putting more thought into how to play this mode than the people who actually made it. Because I get that last hit thing is a thing that is part of Dota, which is a MOBA game that is that kind of is an inspiration for that mode. But in Dota, like, that's a small enemy that gives you a small amount of experience that is a constant stream of minions that you need to get the last hit on, and then whoever gets the last hit on that enemy gets the experience from that enemy. And in Dota, it's logical and it works. When it's like over 1/10 of the amount of score you need to win the game, the last hit thing, that doesn't fucking work. That completely breaks the game. Yep. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I've gotten fucked by that more times than I can count.
Yeah, so that happened to me, and I was like, well, yeah, this isn't even... Like, this is so annoying to play that I don't even want to play it when I'm just listening to a podcast and not even really paying that much attention.
Yeah.
Because the one time I felt like, hey, I'm contributing something to my team, I feel like I've figured this out, and then it's like, oh, wait, no, everything I've done has been completely useless because I have been trying to just play the game the way that seems like you should be playing it, but that's not the way you should be playing it. You should just be sitting in the corner with a fucking sniper rifle.
And that, kind of in a nutshell, defines Halo 5 Guardians.
Yeah.
Go ahead and skip it. There's lots of other games out.
Yeah. Yeah, wait until, like, let's see what, like, this BTB mode is like. Let's see, like, when they drop Forge.
Or, fuck it, buy the Master Chief Collection and play to your heart's content on every map ever made.
Yeah, if you don't have the Master Chief Collection, like, buy that, play through the campaigns. It's a lot of fun. Halo 2's rocky, but Halo 2, like, every time I play Halo 2, I get to that fucking Sentinel factory map level, and I'm like, oh god, this is the most, like, unmemorable, boring, sucking slog bullshit. But then you get to some of the cutscenes, you're like, the story in Halo 2 is actually really fucking good. It's just really let down by some pacing issues with the level design.
And I think that the redone cutscenes in Anniversary really shine a light on where that story shines brightest.
Yes, so, yeah.
Yeah, great. I mean, Halo 2's highs are really high.
Yeah.
And even its lows have beautiful design and wonderful music and a great sense of atmosphere. All those things that I think Halo 5 doesn't have even as a baseline.
Yeah. I mean, I think Halo 2's campaign is far superior to Halo 5's, even if I have obvious issues with it.
And we have nostalgia for it, but I think even when we take the nostalgia goggles off, it's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I could scream for hours about how fucking bullshit the Jackal snipers are in Halo 2. Like, I maybe hate Jackal snipers in Halo 2 more than I hate anything in any video game ever, but it's still a much better campaign than Halo 5. At least you don't fight the same boss 5 fucking times in Halo 2. At least, you only fight Tartarus once. You don't have to fight Tartarus, like, in the last 5 levels over and over again. So it's definitely better than Halo 5.
Absolutely. Alright, so I've got one other piece of personal stuff to talk about.
Alright.
So, I finally finished work this week on something I've been hinting at on the podcast over and over, which is my master's thesis for graduating college. And I just want to mention that for a second, because somehow, while writing this, it was supposed to be more of a thud.
Yeah.
I had time to do this podcast weekly. How did that happen?
I don't know.
I wrote this in the last 2 months, basically. It was after a lot of planning. But through that, we had the podcast weekly, and I think that actually helped me as like a routine kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm more productive when we get the podcast done every week. I don't know what that is.
Forcing yourself to keep to a schedule, which is something that we're obviously not very good at. It helps you be more productive at other things.
Yeah.
Keep a broader schedule.
It does. Anyway, I want to say this because it will be out at some point for everyone to read. I'm not exactly sure when. But you might remember that my undergraduate thesis, which I did last year, was about Hayao Miyazaki, the Japanese animator, and some films by him. Specifically was called Seeing with Eyes Unclouded, Representations of Creativity in the Works of Hayao Miyazaki. And I wouldn't even mention this except these theses get published on like a university server kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that one I wrote has been incredibly popular.
Oh, cool.
It gets like 70 hits a month. And as I understand it, for theses, undergraduate theses on that portal, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I've talked to friends who've done that, and that's really high. So it's up to, like, above 500 views in the last 8 months or something. And so I assume listeners have probably read it. It's linked on my site and stuff, and might have liked that. It's a topic we've talked about before. And so I mentioned this because this is basically the sequel. So I got to experience the highs and lows of creating a sequel on my own. And I think I did a better job than Halo 5, hopefully. It would not have been hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is called Elegy for a Lost Tomorrow, Representations of Loss in the Works of Isao Takahata. It is much sadder than the last one, as the title probably suggests. This was kind of tough to write in that vein, but it's about 3 films by Isao Takahata: Grave of the Fireflies, Only Yesterday, and the most recent film, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. And I really had always wanted to do something like this. I kind of liked the idea of the symmetry of, all right, I had to do 2 theses for college. Let's do one on Miyazaki and one on Takahata. They are the 2 main people at Studio Ghibli. Those are my favorite films.
Yeah.
Let's knock that out. And then I guess I'm done for life. I've written what I wanted to write, and I can go into the sunset and never write again. Yeah. I guess that's where I'm feeling right now. That's what happens when you finish a big project. Anyway, so this one, I don't know, somehow got really long. It's 204 pages. I'm not sure how that happened, and I kind of want to jump out a window because of it. Yeah. But it's good. It took a lot out of me, but it was very cathartic in the end to write. And so it'll be coming to an internet near you sometime. I'm not exactly sure what the process is. There might be a server like that for master's theses, in which case you'll just be able to download it from there. And if not, I will obviously release it myself. Right. So it'll be coming out. But I am holding the bound version here, formatted. I'm turning this in tomorrow. Yeah. And I just want to mention that because it's done. I'm holding it. It's not in me anymore. It's in my hands.
How great would it have been when you had slammed it on the table, the binding just shattered and everything just went scattering everywhere, and it's God damn it, I gotta do that again.
I have 3 more of these.
Then you do that with all the other copies, too.
Okay. Did you really think I made 1 copy?
Yes.
Okay.
That sounds like something you would do.
And then, delete all the files on my computer? No. More than one person has to read these.
Yeah,
okay. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, just wanted to mention that because, boy, that was a big part of my life for the last 2 months. And I didn't talk about it much on the show, but when I wasn't, talking about the stuff we talked about on the show, I was pretty much working on this. Yeah. So, thank fucking Christ, it's done.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Anyway, so just want to mention that. Let's see what else we got to talk about. Sean, you mentioned earlier the insanity of Star Wars.
Yes.
There was yet another Star Wars trailer this week.
There was.
It was the trailer from Japan, the exclusive Japanese trailer. I'm not exactly... This always happens with big movies, is that Japan gets an awesome exclusive trailer. And I know Japan is a big film market. Yeah. But they're not the biggest, and so it kind of makes me laugh.
Because you don't see, or at least I don't see that, there are, the Chinese Star Wars movie trailer, or, the English or, the British Star Wars movie trailer. The Indian Star Wars movie trailer. You never see that, but you do see, the Japanese trailer for a bunch of different things.
And I know that's probably because Japan uses a lot of the same internet services we do. You're not going to see the Chinese trailer for stuff because China's got their internet on lockdown.
Yeah, that's true.
Japan is a lot freer in that sense. But anyway, it is still kind of funny. But what did you think of the Japanese trailer, Sean?
I liked it. It's a more sort of traditional styled movie trailer than the other Star Wars trailers. We've talked about it, and I've been a little bit frustrated with how sort of coy the trailers have been, I guess, with not really showing you anything, not saying anything, and as a result, just basically feeling like they are entirely pandering to people's nostalgia, which they are, to try to get people to go watch the movie, which is understandable from a marketing perspective, also kind of insulting on a personal perspective. And so this is more hey, we're going to say who these new characters are. We're going to have their names appear in the trailer at some point. We're going to have a couple of lines of dialogue be spoken. There's a little bit more substance to it. Not that I'm not saying it's it doesn't really give away much of a plot or anything, but it is a more sort of coherent trailer, I suppose, and I appreciated that.
I thought this was exactly right because you used the word coy before, and that's probably the perfect word to use because I think you can cut a trailer that doesn't give anything away without being coy. And while I've very much liked the Force Awakens trailers so far, they have been very coy. This one did not feel coy to me at all. It didn't give anything away, and I appreciate that. But it also, as you say, felt like an actual trailer.
Yeah.
Like, I like that basically the whole thing was driven by the character, and we can say her name now because it's in the trailer, Rey.
Yeah.
And kind of her dialogue. We actually get to hear Daisy Ridley talk and hear what accent she's using and that sort of thing. And that just, it felt so much more grounded to me because then it's like, okay, she is clearly the main character. Here's Finn, the guy she's with, and he's going to be another key part. And it just felt like the perspective was clearer of what this movie's going to be.
Yeah.
And then I thought it had more diverse kind of shots. Like, I liked that we got to see Kylo Ren in daylight.
Yeah.
It was cool. Like, again, I don't feel like they've given anything away. I don't feel like my experience in the theater will be marred. But I got a little more excited out of this one than even the other ones, just because it's like, yeah, there's a little substance to it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not all fade to black, fade back in.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford talks. Luke talks.
Yeah, while, like, really memorable Star Wars theme plays. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, here's a TIE fighter, here's an X-Wing, here's a lightsaber.
This is the first of the trailers not to use any John Williams in it, I guess at the very end, but otherwise it's generic trailer music.
Yeah.
And I think that actually might work in the trailer's favor, because it feels like then you're focusing on the visuals and stuff, and not just... Like, it lets me know, okay, those are cool visuals, it's not just John Williams manipulating me.
Yeah.
So,
it very well could have been just John Williams manipulating you.
He is very good at that.
Yeah, he's the well-known manipulator.
Yes.
With his wiles and his music.
We mean that in the best way possible.
Yes, no, yeah, I love his music. But...
Yeah. So anyway, again, he almost makes you believe Padme and Anakin are in love in Episode 2.
Yeah.
And then they talk about sand, and that kind of goes out the window. But...
And his music also makes great fucking loading screen music for Star Wars video games.
We were talking about this off the air last week, that Sean only remembers the love theme from Episode 2 from Battlefront.
Yeah, because it's the loading screen music from Battlefront.
And I did not know that, and I think it's a hilarious choice.
It is, but it's a really atmospheric song.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it works really... It reminds me of... There's that piano song, I think Never Forget, in the Halo games that plays when you're looking for matchmaking. It kind of has that same feel. It gets you a little bit somber, a little bit emotional before you go in and just shoot stuff.
Nice. Does the new Battlefront use John Williams?
I think so. I can't remember specifically what music it had, but it had Star Wars music. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, for sure.
It would have sucked if it was just, like, knockoff Star Wars music.
Yeah. Like, every Star Wars game has Star Wars music, almost to, like, an obnoxious extent, where, like, occasionally you'll play a Star Wars game where it'll be, like, playing the Star Wars song, and it's like, it's a really good Star Wars song, but, like, the tone of this song in no way matches what I'm doing on screen right now. Like, it's either, like, I'm kind of doing nothing, and you're playing, like, this really high-paced, like, pumped-up music, like Duel of the Fates or something, and I'm just kind of, like, walking around picking up, like, fucking audio log or something, or I'm in this huge battle, and it's playing, like, some just, like, really kind of casual, like, normal, like, kind of nothing's going on comedic music or something. It's like...
Yeah.
You can't just put Star Wars music, like, haphazardly into your game. Like, you actually have to fit the tracks to what's going on. Or make some new original music, like Knights of the Old Republic did, that fits into the Star Wars style of music, which is what I appreciate. But.
Yeah, definitely. But, so they had the Japanese trailer.
Yes.
Very good. Then there was a new TV spot that had yet more new footage, and at that point I'm wondering, all right, when is this House of Cards just going to come tumbling down?
Yeah.
Because are we in the point where we're just going to get new footage every day until the movie comes out? And at that point, they're going to ruin a lot of the goodwill they've built.
Yeah.
So stop. We've seen enough. It's okay.
Like, TV spots always suck. Like, they're always...
Yeah.
I don't like watching them, really, because it feels like... a marketing intern made them, as opposed to, like, there was, like, someone whose job it is to just make really awesome trailers and cuts together good trailers.
Yes, it is strange. I mean, especially because we're at the point where it's like, everyone's bought their fucking tickets. You've got everyone.
Yeah, like, literally, it's impossible to get tickets anymore. The internet died the day that Star Wars tickets came online.
There are estimates that this movie could be making close to $1 billion worldwide its opening weekend. So, yeah.
Do you think that, like, Disney is just going to use all the money they get from this movie to just make an actual literal Death Star and take control of the world?
I think it's possible.
Because it feels like that has maybe been their scheme the entire time. Like, they're going to take this and then, like, Avengers 3 money and just, like, pool it together and just, like, take over everything. They're not making an Infinity Gauntlet plot or prop for Avengers 3. They're just literally making the actual Infinity Gauntlet, and they're just going to kill us all.
I love it. We had some other stuff on the docket, but fuck it, I'm going to use that as a transition
Okay.
because you just described the perfect James Bond villain plot.
Sure, yeah.
Which is James Bond villain takes over Disney, he makes a bunch of money, he makes a space laser so he can get more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that could happen. So let's talk about James Bond.
All right.
As you heard at the top of the show, we had a little James Bond music. That's because this week marks the release of Spectre, the 24th film in the James Bond franchise, and one of the more disappointing ones. Wah, wah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you haven't already read it, I've got a review up on the site. It's not the most formal thing in the world. Again, I was working on this monstrosity over here. So I kind of just took an hour after I saw the movie and typed up some thoughts and threw them out there. It's not like all that well organized. And it's full of spoilers, so I guess... What?
I feel like... What is the point of writing a review that has spoilers in it?
It's really not a review.
Okay.
It's more observations.
Okay.
But it's like... I also did not know how to... There's no way I could talk about this movie without spoilers. It's just like... You and I talked about it a lot off the air. And you get what I mean? Like, this stuff that's bad about it is so tied to the spoilers.
Yeah, that there's a specific plot twist that seems to me is not a very good plot twist.
No, what I did is I wrote all my thoughts, and then I went back to the top and did a general impressions paragraph, and then said, spoilers after the jump, you've been warned. And then at that point I washed my hands of it, because if you can't read spoiler warning, it's on you. So, anyway... But it's there, so you can read that if you've seen the movie, or if you don't feel like you need to see the movie, you can look at the spoilers. I
would recommend it. I think the spoilers are really fun to hear.
Well, then let's go with it. Okay, spoiler-free reaction first. Spectre has some good stuff, it has some bad stuff, and then it has some really bad stuff, and in the end it just feels like a very, to me, more than anything else, obligatory James Bond movie, where everyone knew they had to make a James Bond movie, but no one really wanted to, and no one really had any good ideas, and they just gotten the rights back to Spectre after 40 years, and they're like, well, I guess we don't really have any ideas, but I guess we can do something like that. And then they played into all the worst tropes of modern moviegoing, and in many ways Spectre feels like the epicenter of the worst traits of cinema right now, which is that penchant for just over-explaining absolutely everything, trying to tie everything into larger mythology, trying to set up stories more than telling stories, all those things we complain about a lot.
Yeah.
It's not a worse movie than some of those. Like, it's not worse than Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's much better than that. But it is even more representative in some ways because now it's touching this franchise that really invented a lot of the rules of modern blockbusters and at its best plays by its own rules. Like, I think why Skyfall was so successful is because it doesn't look or sound like any other thriller being made today.
Yeah.
It was its own thing, and it was James Bond through and through, and that's when James Bond tends to be at its best, is when it's not just, when they're not doing the Moonraker thing and making a sci-fi movie because Star Wars was popular, right?
Yeah.
Sending James Bond to space, although Moonraker, a much better movie than this, so much more interesting.
Well, hopefully now after Star Wars is so popular again, maybe the next James Bond movie will just be Moonraker 2, and they make their first, just full-on, fuck it, we're just doing it again. It's just Moonraker with Daniel Craig.
So they do the Final Fantasy thing of, Final Fantasy X-2?
Yeah, exactly.
Moonraker
yeah,
2.
just, I want to see Daniel Craig running around the world, getting dress spheres, and just being basically a Japanese pop idol.
I'd like that, too. I mean, and I don't think the film... Daniel Craig is awesome. We all agree on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think he does good work here. I think he's trying. But, a lot of people said he looks kind of sleepy in this movie. I don't think that's it. I think they're giving him really bad material. And I think the writing... I think the first 3 movies of his run, even Quantum of Solace, which is the weakest, I think they really knew his specific characterization and how to write for it. And they don't here. Daniel Craig's Bond is really funny if you look at some of the moments in his movies. There's a great scene in Casino Royale where he and Vesper Lynd are flirting on the train when they first meet. And at the end she says, "How was your lamb?" And he says, "Skewered. One sympathizes." And I think that is one of the best jokes in any James Bond movie. But it's a very dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
And in this movie, they just kind of have him making jokes, kind of Roger Moore style. And that's not out of keeping for James Bond as an idea. It is for Daniel Craig. And what makes each Bond special, kind of like Doctor Who, is that you have to tailor it to the actor doing it.
Yeah.
You can't just write generic crap and have them make something out of it. And I think that's a lot of the writing in Spectre, and I do think maybe some of Daniel Craig's apathy that has come across in the press, much of which is the fault of the press for being annoying, but much of it might also be that I don't think this movie really challenged him in the way that something like Skyfall, I think, clearly did. And I don't think it was tailored to him, and that's not good. And if he does, hopefully he does one more that they can maybe wrap this up better.
Yeah, so that way, 3 out of 5 is better than 2 out of 4.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would still recommend Spectre if you are a James Bond fan, if you're interested in this series. It's a very fascinating movie. It's got some good stuff. Like, the opening sequence is incredible. I love that. I love all the stuff with, most of the stuff with Q. I think Ben Whishaw is such a good Q, and I hope they keep that going. They kind of waste the new Moneypenny, because I think they're not sure what to do with her. Because I think there was a chance, I heard Drew McWeeny from HitFix talking about this on a show on that site, that they could have done something really fun where she's like out in the field helping out, and then the joke is she always has to go back to the desk as the secretary, and they kind of make fun of the Moneypenny trope.
Yeah.
And they kind of try to have it both ways in this movie, and I don't think it works. And then she's kind of out of the movie after the first act, which is too bad, because she and Daniel Craig, he is at his best in this movie opposite her, because they have really cool chemistry.
Yeah.
Where they're just flirting. I mean, that is who Moneypenny is, if you watch the other ones. Like, Pierce Brosnan's best moments are with his Moneypenny, who was named Samantha Bond, which I thought was, that's the actress's name. Because they flirted well, and it was the same with, Roger Moore in Moneypenny, or with Sean Connery in Moneypenny. It's where you get the best flirting in a James Bond movie,
yeah.
And what's funny is they're never really going to consummate it. And I thought they got that in her first scene, and then she's kind of just out of the movie, so it's weird. And then Ralph Fiennes' M is out kicking ass. No, that's not what M does. You missed the point. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care if M is a old woman or an old man, whatever. He's not out there, fighting people. That's really not the point. And they lean too heavily on him, and then the mystique of the character goes away, and that's too bad. But anyway. So, Spectre, now let's spoil it.
Yes, because this is the part that's really exciting.
Yeah. All right. So, y'all know Christoph Waltz is playing Blofeld. Y'all know this because it's called Spectre. Blofeld is the big bad in James Bond who runs Spectre.
Yeah.
And Christoph Waltz is a cool foreign guy who plays scary villains.
Yes.
Of course he's playing Blofeld. This is even more obvious than the whole Khan thing in Star Trek Into Darkness, because at least then you would say to yourself, he's probably playing Khan. But
wait. Khan was in... Benedict Cumberbatch didn't play Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness. He straight up said so, Jonathan. What are you talking about? I refuse to believe it.
But at least then, you knew it was such a stupid idea to have this English guy play a character named Khan Noonien Singh that you thought, maybe there's a possibility it is just internet hype.
Yeah.
But with Spectre, no. Of course he's playing Blofeld. We know this. But no, in all the marketing, he's called Franz Oberhauser, and for the first hour and a half of what is a very long movie, Spectre is 2.5 fucking hours long and does not need to be that long. And I'm okay, Skyfall is 2:20, and every minute of it is earned. No, Spectre, it needs to be 2.5 hours. Anyway, you get 90 minutes in, he's Franz Oberhauser, and then he says to James Bond, when I faked my death as Franz Oberhauser, more on that in a minute, I changed my name, and I am now Ernst Stavro Blofeld. And then James Bond, as he would in this continuity, just kind of shrugs, okay, why are you acting like this is a revelation? Why are you talking to this point off over my shoulder? Oh, you're talking to the camera, because this isn't for me in the movie, this is for the audience who is somehow expected not to know he's Blofeld.
Yeah.
What? It's it's the problem that Star Trek Into Darkness had, but elevated to 11. It's so stupid, and that's not even the dumbest part. So here's the dumbest part. After he reveals that his name is Ernst Stavro Blofeld, we find out the dark backstory of Blofeld and of James Bond, which is that James Bond 007, when he was a kid and he was orphaned, as we learned about in Casino Royale and Skyfall, and which is part of his backstory in the Ian Fleming books too. I don't know if they allude to it much in the other movies, but they've made it part of the Daniel Craig stuff. So after his parents died, he was briefly adopted by a man named Hans Oberhauser. How he was adopted by an Austrian man and moved to Austria when he is a British child, I do not know. I thought they just got sent to orphanages and sang songs and musicals. But
no, they shipped them all off to Austria.
Okay, yeah, that's how it goes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So anyway, Hans Oberhauser had a son named Franz, who was the Christoph Waltz character. And they were he and James were roughly the same age, which doesn't quite make sense because Christoph Waltz is clearly older than Daniel Craig. And you know what? I might be wrong on that. Daniel Craig is 50 now. He looks younger than he is, and Christoph Waltz probably looks older. So whatever. Anyway, they were roughly the same age. And Franz got really jealous of James Bond because Hans was giving all his attention to James Bond. He taught him to ski, and how to do other stuff. I don't remember the whole list of things.
Right.
And Franz felt like he was being ignored. So after 2 years of this, Franz staged a skiing accident with his father in which he killed his father and faked his own death. And then, upon faking his death, crafted the identity of Ernst Stavro Blofeld, which apparently no one had ever heard of because they kept calling him Franz Oberhauser. I don't really get that part of it. I don't really get any of this, but whatever. And he built the giant, megalomaniacal organization Spectre so he could, do all this world terrorism shit, but ultimately just fuck with James Bond, who he somehow knew would go on to become a super spy, and then he could send, all these... And it's never clear, did James Bond just stumble onto Spectre, operations and it was a giant coincidence? Or did Franz Oberhauser, arrange these convoluted things where James Bond would, run into Le Chiffre or something, and this would happen? Either way, it doesn't seem plausible, and if you watch the other 3 Daniel Craig movies, it just doesn't fit at all.
Yeah.
It's not even it makes me like those movies less. It just doesn't fit. You have to ignore Spectre because Spectre makes no sense.
Yeah, it's it's in its own continuity. It's just it went off. It's like a parallel universe or something.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff literally could not have happened. I mean, especially because when you think about it, he is, at the start of Casino Royale, basically just out of the military and getting his certification as a spy. Blofeld couldn't have planned any of that.
Yeah.
And they give very specific reasons for why James Bond runs into these villains in the other ones, and it's not because of who he is, it's because of where he is in his own detective work and stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the explanation in Spectre. That is the big twist. And as I said to Sean, and as I firmly stand by, that is the dumbest thing that has ever happened in a James Bond movie. And I include in that the film Die Another Day, which I watched recently, the plot of which is that James Bond at the beginning kills this North Korean, prince, or, heir to the throne.
Yeah.
And then that guy doesn't really die, and to get his revenge, he undergoes, surgery to turn himself from Korean into a white Englishman. And then as a white Englishman, in the next, because there's only a year in which this could happen, becomes a multi-millionaire, a billionaire, the Steve Jobs of England. And then he uses that to build a giant space laser so he can extort the planet Earth and make more money, even though he had the money to build a space laser.
Yes.
That is
You can never have enough money, Jonathan.
No. Would you agree with me? That is not quite as dumb as the thing in Spectre.
No, because that's at least, that plot is completely insane. But because it's insane, it works. Because it's a ridiculous comic book spy plot.
Yeah.
It's you can accept it. It's there are certain kind of boundaries of plausibility almost that once you break past a certain boundary, and just something as simple as being there are ghosts in this world. You've blown past this boundary of plausibility that's well, at least I firmly believe, no, ghosts don't actually exist, but I can enjoy something that has ghosts in it, and, within the world, that suspension of disbelief, that can work. As soon as you go, giant space lasers, a lot of other stuff can come with it that just gets, brought under the umbrella of giant space laser that you can now buy into, right? That's how that works.
Yes. I love the term space laser so much.
Yeah. But when your movie is, not only is, the movie itself within, this realm of sort of, plausible, kind of, realistic spy fiction, but it's also the 4th movie in this now series of, the smaller series of James Bond movies that star Daniel Craig that have, this smaller continuity that they've apparently now completely fucked up, that, the things that happen in Casino Royale or Skyfall cannot in the real world actually occur for, huge numbers of reasons. But within a fictional world, it is highly plausible. There's not crazy fucking insane shit that you don't understand going on in Casino Royale or Skyfall. And I just mentioned those two specifically because I have not seen Quantum of Solace.
Well, even with Quantum of Solace, these are all very small-scale movies.
Yeah.
The biggest threat Daniel Craig has faced is Quantum of Solace, where a guy is trying to steal water from Bolivia or something.
Yeah, exactly. The enemy plots are not about taking over the world or destroying the world or something. It is about I want revenge against this organization, so I'm doing this stuff. Or it's I just basically want to get money and I'm running a drug ring or all this kind of shit, normal crazy criminal shit. That's what happens in those movies. And then now in Spectre, all of a sudden you're throwing in this incredibly elaborate backstory that feels like it's wrenched from some shitty 80s kids movie.
Yes.
About one an adopted child that then is taking attention away from the other kid that then turns that kid bad, and then it's almost as if the Austrian dad guy wasn't going to his baseball games or something.
Yes.
It's that kind of plot that just doesn't fit in and stretches the plausibility so far when you consider that this villain's motivations are so petty and so rooted in something that happened when he was just a little kid that it's impossible to believe that he would then go on to construct some sort of megalomaniacal scheme to trap James Bond that he somehow knows didn't just go off to become a farmer or something, where he doesn't just go off to work at a cubicle at some company. No, of course James Bond would eventually, when he grows up, become some sort of super spy. So that means that I have to create some sort of evil organization called Spectre so that I can trap him. It's insane.
It's not even as... literally, that is the plot twist in Goldmember.
Right.
I'm not kidding. The third Austin Powers movie, the twist is that Austin Powers and Dr. Evil are brothers.
Right, yes.
That is the twist in an Austin Powers movie, and it makes way more sense in Austin Powers. It is earned in Austin Powers. It becomes this weirdly emotional moment where Dr. Evil and Austin put their, rivalry aside and learn to become brothers again. And it almost feels like that's what they're going to do in Spectre, because fuck it, you've ruined everything.
Yeah, because if you're going to do that shitty backstory, you should follow it through and have the shitty, saccharine, makeup that's well, no, now we need to, rekindle our old friendship and become a family again. That is how it should end, based on the character arc.
Yeah.
It sounds insane.
And and here's how the movie climaxes. So you have that, and as soon as, Blofeld gives his big speech, all the air goes out of the movie, and he becomes not even vaguely terrifying because he's a petty little kid, he's a 10-year-old. But then the climax is James Bond gets back to London, and Blofeld has a plan to take over all the world's surveillance. And it's another weird thing where his plan involves it's like a UN kind of thing, and this is where we mostly see M in the movie, because Blofeld's agent within the British government is trying to get all these it's in the UN, this council of 9 countries, trying to get them all to sign off on this surveillance agreement, and the ones that aren't signing off, Blofeld stages terrorist actions in to get them to sign off on it. That actually sounds like a pretty good setup for a James Bond movie.
Yeah.
Except they don't follow through on that. So the first scene in the movie is James Bond thwarting one of those terrorist things, and he doesn't know he's doing it yet. Why isn't the rest of the movie him trying to thwart the other ones? The rest of the movie is him trying to find Blofeld, and it's just kind of boring, and he just keeps jumping around the world. And then we find out at one point, he did a terrorist thing in South Africa. Why wasn't James Bond in South Africa figuring that out? That would have been a much better movie. Mm-hmm. And maybe he fails, and that's the end of the second act, and that's the big kind of sad moment, and then he has to go confront Blofeld, and that's a better kind of momentum. But no. So anyway, he has the surveillance thing, and he's going to take over the world's surveillance. What is he going to do with it? We don't know. It's just he's going to do it, and that's bad because he's Christoph Waltz, and we're supposed to think he's the bad guy.
Yeah, he watched The Dark Knight, so he's well, that thing that happened at the end of The Dark Knight with all the Morgan Freeman character stuff.
Yeah,
I'm going to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I guess. Anyway, so what it comes down to is there's a countdown at midnight. This is going to go online. So Q has to hack the system by midnight to do that. Q hacks it immediately, and that's the end. It's Q goes bup, 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 done. And he just becomes Deus Ex Q.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. But in the meantime, there's another countdown because James Bond gets kidnapped again and taken to the old MI6 headquarters that were bombed in Skyfall, which they still haven't fixed for whatever reason. And Blofeld has set up this whole smoke and mirrors thing in there where he's pasted posters of James Bond's past enemies all around, and he's just basically being the Joker and fucking with him.
Yeah.
And basically risks everything, his whole organization, just to fuck with James Bond. And what does James Bond do? James Bond turns the tables and captures him. And the countdown there is that his James Bond's girlfriend is somewhere in the building with a bomb strapped to her chest.
Right, of course.
Anyway. They were getting progressive with James Bond, and then they stopped. So anyway. And then he shoots down Blofeld's helicopter, and then decides not to kill Blofeld. And then he goes off and riding off into the sunset with his
why
new
doesn't he
girlfriend.
kill Blofeld? That seems fuck that guy. Kill him.
He doesn't kill Blofeld because they probably want to use Blofeld in future movies.
Oh, right.
But in the actual context of the film, why he doesn't is Blofeld wants him to do it, and James Bond realizes, no. And he sees Lea Seydoux, his girlfriend, standing at the other end of the bridge. They're on Westminster Bridge. And he says, no, I have something better. And he drops the gun and walks off to her.
No,
That's stupid.
Yeah. Because, I don't know, like, even if it's, like, even with another Daniel Craig James Bond movie, at least I personally would be fine if they just killed Blofeld and then he's literally the villain in the exact next movie. I mean, maybe it's because I watched Doctor Who and literally every time the Master pops up, like, after the Roger Delgado years, he dies in that story, then pops up in the next story, and there is no explanation, and luckily New Who has brought that forward. You don't need to explain how this villain has not been killed. You just, like, leave them in the middle of a volcano and, like, douse them in fucking lava, and then they can pop up again. And it's Anthony Ainley again. It's not like he regenerated. It's like, I don't know how you got out of that, but I like this character, so I want to be the villain still.
And the thing is, I think you could do a very good movie building up to James Bond choosing not to kill Blofeld.
Sure. Yeah, he refines his family and his brother.
No. Yeah. I mean, just in a general sense that he is... Because that's kind of what Quantum of Solace is about. I mean, that's the thing. Spectre is the less good version of Quantum of Solace, which isn't a great James Bond movie to begin with. I don't think it's a terrible one, but it's not... It's middle tier.
Right.
And this is the lesser version of that. Because that whole movie is James Bond is very angry after the death of Vesper Lynd. He keeps going around killing people. And when he finally gets to the person he wants revenge on, he decides to let it end and not kill that person. And instead just kind of talks to them. And it's actually, I think Quantum of Solace is a really nice ending. This is not that. This is just kind of stupid. Because, of course, you want Blofeld alive so you can get information out of him and that stuff.
Sure.
But that's not what we're thinking about in the moment. We're thinking about... You've got a license to kill, dude. Sean Connery's narrator told me he has a license to kill whoever he pleases, whenever he pleases, wherever he pleases.
Yeah, exactly. He can just murder people. Like, it's his... But it is something where it's like, you know... I'm sure James Bond in that movie probably killed a lot of people who deserved it a lot less than Blofeld did.
Yes.
He does that in all the movies, so...
Yeah.
Like,
no.
Shoot him.
Here's the thing. There's a scene... So the scene... The whole, like, extended sequence that leads to Blofeld revealing all the, like, exposition stuff is they get to this, like, place way out in the desert where Blofeld has his base. And so they go to his base, and in that base, there's a kind of cool, creepy scene where Blofeld is walking them through it, and you see just how many people he has there, and how many, people are, like, following him. And then, at the end of that sequence, after James Bond is tortured and all that, James Bond, to get out of the torture, he has a watch Q gave him that is also a bomb. Right?
Of course, yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
So he finally, he gets out of the torture chair and throws the bomb watch at Blofeld and blows him up. And then when next time you see Blofeld, he's got, like, an eye missing and that kind of thing. So that happens. But apparently, then he and Lea Seydoux get out of the building, and a bunch of things are exploding from, like, a chain reaction from the watch bomb. And they get out, and they're going to get on the helicopter, and behind them is the most spectacularly staged explosion I've ever seen. Like, it is the biggest explosion I've ever seen in a movie, at least, like, practically, not like the Death Star in space.
Right, yeah.
But what you're thinking the whole time is, we saw hundreds of people in that building.
Right, yeah.
Now, I think what we're maybe supposed to take is that, away from that, is that Blofeld set off some kind of self-destruction sequence, because there's no way the watch bomb did all of that. But either way, James Bond was just witness to the deaths of hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Hundreds. And the thing was, I do think in the first 3 Daniel Craig movies, death means something. We don't just see him randomly killing people over and over again.
Yeah, definitely.
But no. So Spectre is a dumb movie.
Yeah, that's such a bummer, because, like, I mean, I feel like we've talked about it quite a bit on this podcast. Skyfall is really fucking good, and I am not... Like, I don't dislike James Bond, but it's not something that, like, I'm super into. Every James Bond movie I have seen, I've enjoyed, but I've very specifically kind of only watched James Bond movies when I'm kind of in a right mood for it, and I only watch the ones that I've heard are really fun. And so, like, that's kind of how I've experienced James Bond, and I really like Casino Royale. I skipped Quantum of Solace because I wasn't in a mood to see a James Bond movie, and nobody said it was really great, so I was like, well, I can just skip that one. Then I watched Skyfall, and I thought Skyfall was amazing, and as a not James Bond dude, like, I thought it was a really, really, really great action movie. Like, far better than most action movies that are made these days. And I was really excited for this one because it's made by the same people, it's the same director, and I was hoping to get something, like, kind of in that vein, and the idea of the Spectre stuff sounded really interesting, but...
It's so weird, because... It does not feel like it's made by the same people. It does on the level that the cinematography is still gorgeous. Hoyte van Hoytema shot this one. Roger Deakins did Skyfall, but Hoyte is a very great cinematographer too, and he does great work here. And Sam Mendes still can stage some of these sequences beautifully, but it overall feels like a totally different creative team Because it's like they don't get it. They don't get what was good about Skyfall. They don't get what's good about Daniel Craig. They don't get what's good about James Bond in general. Like, just the emphasis on continuity is such a mistake. Like, that's what's great about Skyfall, is that it dropped all the threads that kind of drowned Quantum of Solace. And it said, okay, we're just going to tell a good James Bond story. And we're going to have the weight of 50 years of this character on it, but we're not going to, like, reference every story. We're just going to tell a story. And then with Spectre, they go back to the Quantum of Solace thing of, like, we're going to retcon everything. It's like, that's not what James Bond is about. Frankly, that's not what most movie franchises should be about. You know, if Star Wars 7 comes out and it's literally just them talking about what happened in the past and redoing it all again, that's going to be terrible. And I doubt that's what they're going to do, because I think they know better than that, hopefully, with their giant franchise that they're pinning all their hopes on. But we're in a climate where that's what everyone wants to do, and I don't get it.
Yeah, there is a desire to, like, create these very labyrinthine, interconnected plots where you are retconning things and bringing things back to their past and stuff like that. And we have seen Doctor Who in the past few years struggle with doing that and then breaking away from it. And now Doctor Who is basically completely broken away from it, because I think while there are some stories that, like, you can do that with, those are, like, small self-contained stories that, like, you do it a little bit and then it's done and it's over. If you're doing an ongoing franchise and an ongoing series, the only way to keep that franchise and that series alive is to keep on moving forward, keep on evolving, and keep on changing and being informed by everything that came in the past and using that when you need to push forward, but you're always looking forward. Like, and Skyfall did that beautifully, because even as someone who's not really into the James Bond stuff, like, that movie was about the James Bond character and had a lot of stuff about his history in the movie, but I didn't feel like that was, like, stuff that was like, oh, now I need to go read every single book and see every movie to get what's going on in this film. Like, it presents it and it uses it to push the character forward, and it just exists within that particular story, and that's it, and that's all it needs to do. You do not need to retcon stuff and make everything about, like, this character's past and that he is the chosen one and everyone that he met turned into some villain or into some super ally along the way and that kind of stuff. You don't need to do that, because it just destroys your story.
Yeah, it's annoying, and yeah, I hope Star Wars doesn't do that, because it very well could.
Yeah, it's a danger for sure.
You know, like, my hope honestly would be that Rey and Finn and Kylo Ren have no relationship whatsoever to any of the other characters. I think you could make it work if there's some stuff like one of them is a child of Han or Luke or something. I think that could totally work, because obviously it's worked in the expanded universe before. But I think I have more confidence in it working if they just are people who meet each other, because that's what Star Wars was at the beginning. Like, even the stuff about Luke and Leia being siblings is fucking stupid when you think about it.
Yeah, and it's an insane retcon. Like, it obviously was never planned. Like, it was not planned when they made the first movie. It was not planned when they made the second movie. It was just something that was thrown into Return of the Jedi. It makes no sense.
No. I mean, and they don't even use it. Like, they don't do anything with that. So that sort of thing has not even, to me, necessarily worked well for Star Wars in the past. So, I don't know. We'll see. The point is, Spectre, I wish you were better.
Yeah.
But I came up with a fun activity for the podcast today.
All right.
I had been working on a list that I was going to write a big thing about and publish for the release of Spectre, and then I didn't have time. That's where the podcast is for.
Yes.
So, I have done the stupid activity of ranking all the James Bond films that I have seen from number 19 to number 1. There are 5 I have not seen. Now, I have seen parts of all of these. I just have not... I'm not going to rank them because I haven't seen the full movie.
Right,
so, here are the 5 I have not seen. A View to a Kill, Octopussy, and The Man with the Golden Gun. Those are all Roger Moore movies, and they're, like, I think, generally regarded to be weaker, so I haven't seen them. Diamonds Are Forever, which is the last of the Sean Connery ones. He had gone, he came back for one. It's apparently really bad. And then I haven't seen You Only Live Twice, and I'm kind of saving that one for a rainy day because it's supposed to be great, and I want to have, like, one last great classic Bond movie. But I'll see it at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's go ahead. The 19 that I have seen.
All right.
I realize that's sad when I say it out loud, that I have watched 19 of these.
Jonathan, I've seen every episode of Doctor Who. You don't need... Like, this is pathetic on my standards, so...
It's very, very true.
Let's get on with it.
We're going to go from worst to best, all right?
All right.
So, number 19, Live and Let Die, the first Roger Moore film. It's got a famous Paul McCartney song.
Yep, I like that song.
It's a good song. It's a terrible movie. This is the only James Bond movie that actively causes me pain to watch. It is the blaxploitation James Bond movie.
Right, yes.
And it is It is so stupid on every level. Like, it does not get anything about why James Bond is cool. At least in Spectre, he gets to make a couple of cool quips. But no, in Live and Let Die, it is just dumb from start to finish. It's all like the movie is 100% a comedy. There's not a serious bone in its body. And even like, and I'm going to have a movie way up higher on this list that is also Roger Moore, and it's also very comically oriented. But it still feels like it has a weight to it or a substance, or it's having fun in the right direction. It's not just being silly and kind of like a parody of itself.
Right.
I think there's a difference between being a parody and being fun. This is like a weird parody of James Bond where Roger Moore doesn't even get to act. Like, if you just watch this movie, you would never have any idea whether or not he could be an effective James Bond. Which he is in the good movies. He's a really good James Bond. But you wouldn't know in this because the joke is he's wearing the big tux. You know, he's wearing the really nice suit, and he walks into a black bar in New Orleans, and everyone's talking jive to him, and he doesn't get it. And it is so racist, and it is so dumb, and it's all about, like, voodoo, and they've got, you know, all the people with, all the black people who have their face painted and are playing with snakes and stuff like that. It is the, like, bottom of the barrel in terms of how James Bond treats women, how it treats people of who are not white.
Yeah.
Obviously a problem up to this day with James Bond. But, like, this movie, so bad. And there's even a part where he's in America and has a boat chase, and there's a redneck sheriff who, like, keeps making jokes throughout the scene. And that's awful. It somehow becomes racist towards Americans. This movie is unwatchably bad, and yet I do know some people who love it ironically. And look, I love a couple of James Bond movies ironically. This is not one of them because I'm in the fucking room.
Right.
So bad. It's even like, so this was the 8th movie. And, you know, the ones up to that point were sort of these big widescreen epics, and they had great production values. And not all of them are 100% winners, but they just felt like they were made with care, and they were really big and just, in that sense, like they put work into it. And Live and Let Die looks like they spent $10 on it. It's back to being like 1.85 to 1. It's not widescreen anymore. It looks like they've smeared grease on the lens. It just looks awful. It's sad. Like, nothing about it screams like anyone had put any care into it, which is weird because the hopes for the future of this franchise were theoretically pinned on this thing. Like, I don't know how James Bond didn't die after this one and the one after it, The Man with the Golden Gun, which I've seen parts of, and it's really awful, even though it's got Christopher Lee, who is awesome, as we know. But anyway, Live and Let Die, really bad.
All right. So that's number 19.
Fun fact, that is also in that book, which is also pretty racist. That's the one where Felix Leiter gets his limbs all chewed off by sharks. Which happens in a movie that will be a little higher on our list.
All right.
Anyway, number 18 is Spectre. We just talked about it. I was not sure where to rank this. I just saw it. But I'm just thinking, like, versus all these other ones, what is my desire to revisit it? How do I rank? You know, what does it do? Well, okay, I said it has the dumbest thing to ever happen in a James Bond movie. It probably has to be near the bottom of this list.
All right.
So there it is.
Fair enough.
Number 17, Tomorrow Never Dies. This was the second Pierce Brosnan movie. Some people love this one. Some people hate it. I don't dislike it. Like, I want to say that up front. But this is, like, to me, the worst example of James Bond just doing the formula without any real passion. Because it's okay to be formulaic. It is a movie series with 24 movies. You can be formulaic. But this one just feels like a Mad Libs version of James Bond, where it feels like every scene, it's like, I've seen that scene done elsewhere and done better. And there's nothing even like memorably stupid or crazy enough about it to really recommend it. It just, everything about it feels a little off. It doesn't, Pierce Brosnan is good. I like Pierce Brosnan. I can't really remember anything about the Bond girls. The villain is Jonathan Pryce, and I love Jonathan Pryce, but I think they've got him dialed up a little too bit. He's hamming it up a little too much. And Jonathan Pryce gives good ham. He does. Yeah. But it's done wrong in this one. Even like this, the plot should be so delightfully crazy. It's about a newspaper magnate who creates like mass destruction and terrorism activities just so he has headlines for his newspapers.
Nice.
And they don't even really pay off on that.
It's like Evil Citizen Kane.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah. So it's okay. Like, it's a good one. It's fine. It's not good. I don't know. It's fine, but it's like
it doesn't make your skin crawl like Live and Let Die.
No. So anyway, yeah. And then the next one, we've got a lot of movies with die in their titles. We've got number 16 is Die Another Day, which I've just talked about.
Right.
A lot of people hate this one, and I get it. Die Another Day is a weird one to me because I think it's got one of the best premises of any James Bond movie, and I think the opening is fantastic, the stuff in North Korea. And then when you get out after that, and it's James Bond, an operation goes wrong in North Korea. He is kept as a prisoner of war for like a year and a half. He's let out on a prisoner exchange, and no one at MI6 trusts him because they think he broke. but he didn't, and he's got to like go out and like prove his innocence and try to kind of find the people who did all this to him. That should make for a good movie.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good premise.
Yeah. And all it is James Bond shaves his scraggly North Korean beard, and he goes to a hotel where they know him and they give him everything he needs, and then he's just kind of has an adventure, and then we do all the stuff with North Korea and the space laser and Halle Berry, and there's some fun...
Right, this is the Halle Berry one. Yes. Yeah.
There's some fun stuff in here. Like, there's a whole fencing match between James Bond and the villain that I think is amusingly terrible, and, you know, I like Rosamund Pike, or Rosemary Pike.
Rosamund Pike.
I think it's Rosamund Pike, yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Who's been in a lot of stuff recently. She's a really good actress. She, I think, made her film debut in this as, not Emma Frost, that's an X-Men character, Miranda Frost, who is a cold woman, as we see.
Oh.
James Bond... James Bond literally fucks her on an ice bed. I mean, that's what happens in this movie. They go to an ice palace and fuck.
They don't fuck on the giant space laser?
No.
Oh.
We'll talk about going to space later, Sean.
Right, yeah.
We're getting there. No, and the other thing I want to say about Die Another Day is it has the most sexual puns per minute of any James Bond movie, to the point where it's not even innuendo. It's just, like James Bond in his first conversation with Halle Berry, he says something, and then she looks at his crotch and says, looks like a mouthful. And it's just, that's not even innuendo at that point. That's just saying you're going to give this guy a blowjob, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so... And I kind of love it for that. Like, Pierce Brosnan was really good at the bad sexual puns. There's a specific skill set, but a good one.
A useful one if you're going to be cast as James Bond.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think this movie is funny. I think it's kind of fun to watch. You know, by the end, the fun of it maybe wears off a little because it just kind of, you know, once you've got all the space laser stuff done, it just becomes a little generic and not bad generic, you know?
Yeah.
So, anyway, but I kind of like it. I think it's kind of fun. I would not necessarily recommend it to a casual enthusiast.
Sure, yeah.
We're not in the point of the list where I would genuinely be recommending these to everyone.
Right.
I'll let you know when we get there. 15 is Quantum of Solace. A really hard movie to know where to place. I think it's got a lot of good stuff in it. I think it's got a lot of... Like, there's nothing bad in Quantum of Solace. It's not like Spectre or Die Another Day where there's just stupid stuff. But I think they hired an indie director to make it. Mark Forster, I think is his name. Could not direct action to save his life. The action in this movie is like some of the worst in James Bond because it's just all fast cuts. They're trying to do the Jason Bourne thing of like shaky camera and fast cuts, but when you don't know how to do it, it just becomes gibberish.
Yeah.
And like the movie is mostly action scenes. It's got very little actual like story and dialogue because it was made during the writer's strike and they didn't finish the script. So
well, yeah, if you don't have a full script, you just kind of pave it over with action scenes.
Basically,
that works out.
And it kind of just becomes dull, and kind of you just kind of starts going through the motions, and it just becomes boring. Even though a movie with this much action shouldn't be boring, and that's my big complaint about it. I do think it's got some good stuff. I love Daniel Craig's arc in the movie. I think it's an interesting follow-up to Casino Royale and an interesting kind of attempt to interrogate the idea of revenge. Some of the action scenes are good, and there's one set piece that is done at an opera where James Bond basically uncovers all the members of Quantum, which is what Spectre was before they could call it Spectre. That's a great scene. Like, that scene is fantastic, and I think it puts everything in the movie Spectre to shame because it's what Spectre was trying to do and never did. And I like the last scene of Quantum of Solace, too. So I could place it higher, I could place it lower, theoretically. I kind of like it. I do think if you like the Daniel Craig ones, it is worth watching, but it's just, so much of it is just kind of dull that it's tough to know where to place it.
Right.
Number 14 is a movie that I think is very similar, and is this... Okay, License to Kill is the movie. It's Timothy Dalton's second and final go in the role. License to Kill is kind of a terrible movie, and it is definitely a worse movie than Quantum of Solace. But holy hell, if you are going to see one bad James Bond movie, make it License to Kill. This one is crazy. Because what they did is they noticed that Timothy Dalton, in his first movie, The Living Daylights, which we'll talk about later, Timothy Dalton's a great Bond. He was the first to kind of really do the Ian Fleming Bond. Like, he very much set the stage for Daniel Craig.
Right.
Like 10 years later. But he has an intensity to him. And in some moments, he can make a sexual innuendo, but the look in his eyes makes it sound like he's about to kill you. And so they said, all right, let's make a movie about that. So the movie starts with James Bond and Felix Leiter, his friend in the CIA, and Felix is getting married, and so James Bond is there for the ceremony. But Felix has pissed off some drug magnate in Florida, and the guy takes Felix and throws him in a tank of sharks, and sharks chew off all his legs. And so James Bond naturally is very angry about this, and he wants to get revenge for his friend Felix. And so he decides to step into an episode of Miami Vice and fight the Florida drug cartel. And
that sounds great.
Yep.
That sounds so great.
It is so great, Sean. M comes to Florida to be like, no, James Bond, you have to stop this. And James Bond, punches M out and leaves. He goes insane. He has a mental break. I cannot stress how off the rails James Bond goes in this movie. You think Daniel Craig is intense? No. You have not seen James Bond go insane until you've seen License to Kill. This movie ends with him taking the villain, dousing him in gasoline from a crashed plane, and lighting a lighter and throwing it at him. That is how this movie ends.
Jonathan, I have one question. Why is this not at the top of the list? What is it doing down here?
I don't know. It's tough to rank. There is a scene where James Bond locks a guy in a pressurized chamber and turns up the stuff until he explodes. And I am not kidding, his blood splatters the edge of the chamber. There is so much...
Jonathan, I ask you again, how is this movie not at the top of the list? What is it doing down here?
I don't know, but maybe I can move it higher. But the point is, License to Kill has this incredibly high body count. It's just James Bond kills everyone he meets. He goes completely nuts. He basically acts like the villain for the whole movie because he's insane. He's not doing good. He's just killing everyone until he gets to the guy he really wants to kill, and then he kills him good. And then once he's had his revenge... we get the last scene with Timothy Dalton where he is super mellow with the girl from the movie and just making out with her, and it's a hilariously out-of-place ending to... the movie should end with James Bond going to prison.
Yeah.
The amount of damage he does.
Or just, killing himself or something.
Yes.
After he went on his insane spree.
And I like to imagine this is the actual end of, the original James Bond continuity, where he just went crazy, he gets arrested after the end of the movie, and that's it.
This movie sounds so good. I want to watch this movie now.
You absolutely should. Watch both of the Timothy Dalton ones, because his first one is fantastic, and then you get this one, which is fantastic in a totally different way.
Fuck, man.
Timothy Dalton is awesome. Anyway, number 13 is GoldenEye. I never know what to do with GoldenEye. GoldenEye is obviously iconic, in part because of the video game, in part because the movie came out after a 6-year break that was prompted by License to Kill, bombing and confusing everybody.
Right, yeah.
Because it doesn't feel even remotely like a James Bond movie.
But that's what makes it sound awesome.
Yes. I think GoldenEye's good. I think it's got a great opening. I think Sean Bean makes a great villain. It's got the tank chase in the middle is pretty cool. And it's got it's got Xenia Onatopp. That's a great name. So
sure, yeah.
And I think Pierce Brosnan was a good James Bond. He's not the best. He's probably on the lowest edge of my list, but I still like him. GoldenEye has some things going against it, though, when you watch it now. It has one of the worst musical scores I've ever heard to a movie. It's basically like some dude got a synthesizer and just went, dun, 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 and just had his cat, play on it, and then put that on the movie. And I don't know how Eon, the production company, thought that was okay. And they didn't, say, let's reuse old music. That would be better than this. So that's a problem. And it's kind of funny because after that they hired David Arnold, who I think is the best composer, at least in, the sense of... you had the people early on who, wrote the actual James Bond theme and stuff. But in terms of working on the series over a number of years, what he brought to it musically, David Arnold was great for the series. And I think that was probably prompted by GoldenEye, okay, we have to get a real fucking composer in here.
Right.
That was awful. So GoldenEye's good. I think it's not my favorite of the Pierce Brosnan ones. We'll get to that in a moment. And I think it is overrated. But it's got some good stuff in it. So it's a fun one. And really, it probably is remembered for the video game more than the movie.
Yeah.
But the video game made history. But the video game is the same kind of thing. You go back and play it now.
Oh, God.
Not a lot there.
Yeah, no. Don't go back and play in 64 first-person shooters. That's a bad idea.
All right, number 12 is Moonraker.
Yes.
And here's the thing. Moonraker is often cited as the worst James Bond movie. I do not understand this. I do not understand this on a number of levels. I do not understand it because the movie Live and Let Die exists.
Sure, yeah.
And the movie The Man with the Golden Gun exists. And a movie with the title of Octopussy exists. And in Octopussy, James Bond dresses up as a clown. But also, the movie Moonraker sees James Bond go to space in what is absolutely the most elaborately designed practical space station I have ever seen in a movie this side of 2001. It really does look like they got the crew from 2001 to come make their space stuff. It is amazing. It is beautiful. The cinematography and the production design, it is incredible. It looks like they spent all the money in the world on this thing so they could do a silly action sequence in space where James Bond goes to space and fights Jaws, the villain who is one of the best James Bond villains ever, but it's really funny because he's out in space, and actually, no, in Moonraker, Jaws finds a girlfriend on the space station and falls in love with her, and then I think helps James Bond. Moonraker is awesome. It's got some stupid stuff, but it's got stupid stuff in the best way. Like, this is where we get the underwater car. No, he has the underwater car in Spy Who Loved Me, but it's in Moonraker too. And, there's some dumb stuff in it. But there's so much awesome stuff. I love the stuff in space. I love the fight he has with Jaws. They're on basically a ski lift going up, and I don't know what you call it when it's not for skiing. Gondola. They're on a gondola.
Yes, yeah. Okay, yeah.
And they're on top of a gondola, and Jaws bites the cable and breaks it with his teeth.
I'm pretty sure I've seen that scene. I don't think I've seen all of Moonraker, but I've definitely seen pieces, and I remember that.
Moonraker is just kind of fun. The villain is one of the more memorable ones from the Roger Moore era, because all the Roger Moore villains are basically the same. They're just rich white dudes who are dicks. But this one is kind of more memorable, because again, he's building a space laser. I love space lasers in James Bond, because they make no sense, but let's do it. I think Moonraker is actually a lot of fun. It's definitely got some rough stuff, but it's kind of like, especially if you look at it, because I watched this in a class where we watched most of the James Bond movies. And if you look at it in context, it makes sense. That is just part of a sillier era of James Bond. And yes, it went to some extremes, because James Bond, again, goes to space.
Yeah.
And that's silly. But it's like, if you judge it by the Daniel Craig standards, yeah, it's horrible. But if you judge it by the standards of that series, and coming off Spy Who Loved Me, which is one of the all-time greats, I think it's a decent sequel to Spy Who Loved Me. It is a better follow-up to a great James Bond movie than Spectre is, or Quantum of Solace. And it's more in keeping with what its predecessor did. Even if it goes crazy. But, it's got Jaws, and it's got crazy space stuff that looks beautiful, and I don't know how they did that. But anyway, it's kind of a cool movie.
It's got one of the best titles of any James Bond movie.
Oh, yeah. And I love, this was at the point where they were still using Ian Fleming titles, but basically stopped adapting the books. The plot of the book is Moonraker is a nuke James Bond is trying to find.
That makes more sense.
I love how that became Space Laser.
Which makes even more sense somehow.
Yes. All right, let's go to number 11. And number 11 is where I start. So Moonraker is the last one I recommend semi-ironically, even though I really do like Moonraker. From 11 on, I think these are good movies anyone could enjoy.
Okay.
All right? Number 11 is The World...
Somehow License to Kill isn't there.
Well, you have to be a specific kind of viewer, I think, to get why License to Kill is brilliant.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Number 11 is The World Is Not Enough, which I think is by far the most underrated James Bond movie. It is the third of the Pierce Brosnan movies, and no one talks about it. Ever. No one mentions this movie.
You can tell no one's mentions this movie because I have never heard. I've literally, this might be the first time I've ever heard that title.
Okay, yeah, and it makes sense. No one talks about The World Is Not Enough. The World Is Not Enough is a really good James Bond movie. It's not transcendent, but within the formula, I think it is a really well executed version of that. It plays off of Pierce Brosnan's specific strengths really well, and it's just got a lot of fun action scenes. It's got a great pace. It's got some dumb stuff, but not so much it overwhelms the movie. It's dumb stuff in a way that's fun. Denise Richards is the Bond girl, and she plays a scientist, a astrophysicist or something.
Of course.
Named something Christmas. And then it's Pierce Brosnan constantly making Christmas puns with her. Looks like Christmas came early. That is totally a line in a James Bond movie,
Jesus
and I love
Christ.
it. It's great. But, The World Is Not Enough, they brought back skiing action for the first time in years, and that's going to be a theme from here on out on the list. I love James Bond skiing action.
I mean, skiing action scenes are always good. I've never seen a bad skiing action scene, and that's not a joke. That is straight up. Yeah. I've seen samurai movies with skiing action scenes, and I've seen movies like this with skiing action scenes all across the spectrum. Sword fights, gun fights, fucking kung fu fights. If you are having a fight and you're on a ski or a sled going down a mountain, it's a good action scene. Bar none.
Absolutely, and James Bond does it really well, and my biggest disappointment with Spectre is he goes to the fucking Alps, he gets on top of a mountain, he has a chase scene in the snow, and he doesn't use skis!
Yeah,
He doesn't even use a bobsled!
That's a tragedy! What are they doing? They don't know what they're doing anymore.
No, they don't. But The World Is Not Enough has great ski action, it's got lots of other fun stuff, and it actually, in some ways, is kind of a predecessor to Skyfall, because it's the first one where they took Judi Dench's M and made her more a part of the plot. She gets kidnapped and James Bond is looking for her, and this is the one where she kind of goes from disliking James Bond to kind of becoming his friend. And it's a cool kind of arc. I think they used Judi Dench really well in it. In fact, she is probably in this movie more than she is in any of the other ones other than Skyfall. And she might be in this one more than she is in Skyfall. She's in a lot of it. But she does. It's cool, and I like the plot. And there's lots of great moments. Like, this was the last one with Desmond Llewellyn as Q. And Desmond Llewellyn's Q was so great. He's been in more James Bond movies than anyone else, because he was in From Russia with Love all the way to this one.
Jeez,
and he survived. Yeah, he survived many decades of the franchise. But they knew he was retiring. He knew he was in ill health. So he introduces Bond to his successor, who is played by John Cleese. And then in the end of the scene, he says something like "Farewell, James Bond," and then goes down an elevator, and that's the last time you see him. It's one of the most graceful exits for a long-running character you'll see in anything. It's a really beautiful moment, and I think in what is a really good James Bond movie, I love The World Is Not Enough. It is a fun, very fun movie, and just has some great stuff in it.
Cool.
All right, now we get to number 10. Is Thunderball. Thunderball is probably the weakest of the Sean Connery movies I've seen, but one thing you'll note is that I haven't listed a Sean Connery movie yet, and that's because Sean Connery did have the best qualitative run of movies. They were pretty consistent, and Thunderball being the weakest is still a really good movie. It's got all the underwater action that is kind of poorly paced because it goes on and on, but I think it's pretty cool, and no one had ever done it before, so you can kind of understand why they didn't cut it down.
Yeah.
Because this was the first time really shooting with underwater cameras like that. It's very fun. I mean, Sean Connery just makes everything better. He's so much fun to watch. There is this movie's a little overlong, but I think the general plot and the mystery is pretty cool. He basically is trying to find a nuke that is hidden underwater somewhere, and it moves along well. It's got, it's the first James Bond movie, I think, to have a tank of sharks in it, so that's good. I think it's the last James Bond movie where they just completely dubbed the actress who's the lead actress and got rid of her voice. So that's just kind of awkward and fun in a horribly sexist way.
It was a different time.
Different time. And you know what? If you are of this persuasion where you would be attracted to Sean Connery's 1960s body and physique,
as we all are,
he is in swimming trunks this whole movie.
Fantastic.
I mean, you can see every inch of that dude in this, especially on Blu-ray. Yeah,
great.
Yeah, they did not count on 4K restorations when they made this. I'm just going to say that.
Right. Great.
Okay. Let's move on. Number 9 is For Your Eyes Only. Another of the most underrated James Bond movies ever. This is another Roger Moore, and I really like this one. It's got a lot of great skiing action, which is again why I like it so much.
Yeah,
fantastic. But I think it's kind of a cool movie. It's For Your Eyes Only is my favorite of the James Bond short stories written by Ian Fleming. Not the novels, but he also did a number of short stories. And the short story is really cool. It's James Bond is sent by M on a top secret mission deep into the Canadian wilderness to find this group of assassins or terrorists or something, this cartel, and he has to take them out. And when he gets there, he finds this woman her family was killed by these people, and she's also kind of trying to get revenge, and they kind of team up. And it's a really great story. For Your Eyes Only really just uses that as the beginning of the movie, and then from there on out they have to build a plot after it. But I think the plot they do is pretty fun. It takes, what The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker did, where it's super hyper and silly, and actually tones it down. It is the most serious Roger Moore movie. It is not a serious movie, but it's way more human and kind of human scale, and I think what made it so great, if you watch it in context, is that they finally let Roger Moore just play his age. He is, approaching 60, and he kind of feels like an aged spy who has limits, and he has this relationship with this young woman he meets on that assassination mission, but he's more acting kind of like her father, her, guidance figure, and then they fuck at the end, and that's weird.
Sure.
But up until that point, it actually feels much more appropriate because it doesn't feel like a sexual thing between them, so it's not as weird.
Right.
And it's just really good. It's got some good team dynamics. It's got some good stuff with Q. It's the climax is this really cool rock climbing scene where he has to get up to the enemy's base by rock climbing, and the enemy is sniping at him. That's a pretty cool scene. I really like the Bond girl in this one. She's 18, so it is really creepy when they kiss at the end. You might just want to turn the movie off before that happens.
Right.
But up to that point, I think she's one of the more interesting Bond girls, specifically because there is no sexual thing going on until it comes out of the blue at the end, because I think contractually they had to do it or something. But it's a really good movie. It's got some cool stuff, and I really like it.
Cool.
So that's also the only Bond theme song where the singer, Sheena Easton, is in the song singing it, and it looks like a music video.
Huh.
So it's super bizarre. All right.
Weird.
Number 8, we got Dr. No, the very first one. Dr. No is awesome. And I could go on and on about the different things it does well and what's cool about it. I did not quite know where to place it because I've seen this one so many times in different contexts. But the one thing you need to know about why Dr. No is great is just Sean Connery's introduction, where he is sitting at a poker table, he's gambling, he's smoking a giant cigar, and he's just being generally awesome and flirting with people. And you get, like, he lays down in his very first scene the template for all of Bond. Sean Connery just got it so instantly. It's why he kind of will always be the best. He knew it.
Yeah.
It was great. Number 7 is The Living Daylights. This is the first of Timothy Dalton's movies. It's a little awkward now because the plot is him helping the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against the Russians.
Yes. It's the Rambo 3 of James Bond movies.
Yeah. But to their credit, they didn't know we were going to fuck that situation up so much we were going to create Al-Qaeda.
Right.
So if you can forget that, it got a lot of cool action. It was much more serious. It was them really trying to get back to the kind of Ian Fleming foundation. It's also based on a short story that's really good. The opening, I forget if it's the intro scene is super weird. It's James Bond doing a training exercise. But then, like, the first act is him, I think, in Russia, trying to take this person out, and then he finds out she's a woman, and he decides he doesn't want to kill her, so he just, like, snipes to her right of her head. And then the line that the title comes out of is, M asks, "Did you kill her?" And he says, "No, but I scared the living daylights out of her." And that's the start of the movie. And then that girl becomes kind of the girl in the movie. But it's an interesting relationship. Timothy Dalton is... I think he could have, if he did more movies, he conceivably could have just been the best Bond. He is so fucking good, and I think we'll never quite know, because License to Kill has him playing a crazy guy, and then he never did any more. But he's so, so, so good in this, and he really elevates the whole movie. And the whole movie is already good, but he has this kind of gritty side to him. You really believe him as the spy first, but he can also be suave. He can do all... There's a great scene at a poker table. It is a fantastic movie. Cool. And Timothy Dalton, if you haven't seen a Timothy Dalton James Bond movie, this is the only one where he's really playing James Bond, so you might as well see this one.
Sure.
And then watch License to Kill.
Yes.
Number 6, it's Goldfinger. Of course Goldfinger is high on the list.
Yep.
It's not as high as many people would put it. It is not the best James Bond movie. It is merely the best at the basic formula.
Yeah.
Or it created the basic formula, I should say. I think Goldfinger has some great stuff. It's not as interesting to me as the ones higher on this list, obviously. But it is obviously, it's a great James Bond movie. Yeah. It's just a really fun movie, regardless of the series. And I don't know if I can say more about that. Other than this is the movie with the character named Pussy Galore. And
it's one of, if not the greatest character name in the history of cinema.
And look, the best part of the whole movie is that with Sean Connery's accent, you get to hear him say, "Hello, Pussy," over and over and over.
It's so great.
Yep.
It's really weird, but it's so great.
Number 5 is Skyfall. Skyfall is tough to know where to place because it is so recent. I'm fine with having it in the top 5. It is definitely in the top 5 for me. It is to James Bond what I think an episode like The Doctor's Wife is to Doctor Who, where it is this self-contained story that seems to encompass all of the series within it.
Yeah.
And I think, as the years go by, this could rise higher on the list even. It is a obviously very accomplished James Bond movie. It has the best cinematography of any of them, has some of the best character stuff. It's really great. Number 4 is From Russia with Love. I talked about this a little last week. It is awesome. It's the best of the Sean Connerys, I think. It is more kind of gritty and serious than the other Sean Connery movies. And I'm not saying that to disparage the other ones, just that there's some kind of mixture between the silly and the serious in this one that works really well. Like, they were still figuring out the series, and I kind of like that this is an in-between between Dr. No, which was not the formula yet, and Goldfinger, which would establish the formula. And From Russia with Love was still figuring it out. It is really good. I mean, that fight on the train is so great. But there's lots of stuff. There's a whole scene where James Bond is, like, figuring out who to snipe. That's great. It's great. And it's like a really good detective movie, too, because he's trying to solve this case. So it's great. Number 3 is The Spy Who Loved Me. And this is, in some ways, James Bond's most glorious hour, because it exists at the epicenter of Roger Moore's era silliness, but at the same time, it just works. Like, they nailed the tone so completely, and it is so much fun on such a pure, fun, joyous level. Top to bottom, it is perfectly paced. The action is all fantastic. It has so many iconic moments. I love this movie, and because this week's Doctor Who references it very specifically, you might not know that.
No.
I have to show you a scene from The Spy Who Loved Me.
Okay.
Because that's the best way I can define this. So, I'm going to show it. I'm going to turn the audio up on this because we're going to react to it because there's some great audio stuff that goes on in this clip. This is just the beginning of the movie. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on DVD. All right?
All right.
We'll describe it a little bit as we watch, and we'll get the sound going into the microphone. But let's watch this, Sean, because it's really funny. All right, so we start. James Bond is in bed. He's creepily making out with someone, and his watch gives him
a telegram.
Yes. This is report to HQ immediate, M.
What's happened? Where are you going?
Sorry, darling, something came up.
And Roger Moore just being a total kind of sexist asshole.
Yeah.
He's in the Alps somehow, having sex with a woman.
James, I need you.
So does England.
That is a great line! And then the woman turns out to be a spy.
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
He has just left. He has just left. Over and out.
Message received. We are waiting. Over and out.
Alright, the bad guys. Listen to that music.
Yeah, okay. Oh my god, that green screen.
There's James Bond skiing.
I wasn't ready for the green screen.
And now we're going to have a ski chase, because ski chases are awesome.
Yep.
Look at that green screen.
It's like when you watch, like, Temple of Doom or something. Ugh.
Yep.
I'm into the cowbell. Cowbell's
Yep.
pretty profound in this track.
Alright, he's getting shot at. So what does James Bond do? Look at this.
Maybe the bad guys are splitting up.
Right. Okay, we're not there yet.
This fucking track, dude.
Okay, here's James Bond turning his ski into a rifle.
Wait. What?
Does a backflip.
Okay, backflip, yeah. 10 points on the landing. Okay, he tackles a guy. Still going.
He's headed for a cliff. And he goes off the cliff. Oh god, what's going to happen? Is James Bond going to die, Sean?
Probably. I mean, it's the opening scene of the movie, so maybe not. Who knows?
Right, he's falling, he's dropped his skis. We're in a long shot, we don't know what's going to happen. And then the most glorious thing to ever happens in the James Bond movie. He opens his chute. And what is it, Sean?
It's the British flag, the Union Jack.
Of course it is!
For England.
For England. How great was that?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, it's got everything you want. It's got cowbell. It's got skiing. It's got atrocious green screen effects. And it's got someone deploying a Union Jack parachute. Yeah.
And it's got that great line, I need you! So does England. That is why I love The Spy Who Loved Me in a nutshell. It is such a great movie.
Okay, yeah.
And the Union Jack parachute is referenced in Doctor Who. So,
Yeah.
There you go. Alright, number 2. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. One of the absolute weirdest James Bond movies ever made. As I was reminded of when I was Googling scenes for this list and found someone on YouTube who made a list of the top 10 weirdest moments in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And they are indeed weird. It is a bizarre-ass movie. The plot is James Bond goes to this clinic in the Alps where he thinks Spectre might be doing some bad shit. And it turns out to be this, like, brainwashing clinic with nothing but beautiful women there. And he shags a bunch of them, even though he's just fallen in love.
Okay.
With Tracy Bond. That's, like, the first act of the movie. And it's whatever. But they're being, like, brainwashed into not eating chicken or something. I don't know. And then he finds out the head of the clinic is actually Blofeld, and Blofeld is planning to use his weird brainwashed women to, like, destroy the world's agriculture. The point is, despite all that, or maybe because of it, it's a really good James Bond movie. It really straddles that line between kind of the silliness of the Sean Connery era and the silliness to come of the Roger Moore era, while also being very rooted in the Ian Fleming text and being a little more serious. It is the closest adaptation of any James Bond book by far. Kind of word for word at points. It is just the book with a little more oddity thrown on. And it is a really good story because it's James Bond trying to track down Spectre and kind of shut them down for good. In the course of doing this, he falls in love with a woman, Tracy Bond, played by Diana Rigg, who is one of the best James Bond girls. Very much a model for, like, Vesper Lind in the modern series. And ultimately they fall in love and decide to get married, and then at the end of the movie, Blofeld kills her to get revenge. And it's kind of a really poignant ending. And it just mixes so many good things about James Bond while also kind of finding a higher level to go to with it.
Right.
While also being the movie that introduced the James Bond series to skiing action. And if you like skiing action, this movie happens almost entirely in the Alps. He goes down the mountain, he goes back up the mountain, he goes down the mountain, he goes back up the mountain, and then at the end he uses a fucking bobsled to get down that mountain. And it is awesome every time. It's one of the best directed Bond movies. It's got great action. And if you're disappointed by Spectre, go see this. Because On Her Majesty's Secret Service is basically what Spectre should have been. It is the movie about Spectre, where he finally confronts Blofeld, and he kind of finally defeats him, but then Blofeld gets him back, and he's kind of heartbroken. It is just a really, really good movie, and it's definitely got some weird stuff to it, but I kind of love that. It is very late 60s. Like, if you've seen the original Pink Panther, this is very much like that, in kind of the pace and the tone, and it's not for everyone, I would recognize that, but I think if you know kind of the time it's coming out of, and you like that pace and tone, it works really well. And then the big question mark is, this is the one with the one-off James Bond, George Lazenby, who had the unfortunate task of having to follow up Sean Connery.
Yeah.
And I think he's good. I don't think he's great, and I will never know because he only got to do it once. But I think he's pretty good. I do think, people have said before, if they made this exact same movie with Sean Connery in it, it would probably be the best, hands down. And I think that's probably true. But I also don't think this movie would have been made with Sean Connery, because it was only made the way it was because they knew they had to change things. And at the time, it didn't work. It was a flop. People didn't like it. It's become one of the best regarded James Bond movies, but it really threw people for a loop at the time. And so they went back and paid Sean Connery more and did Diamonds Are Forever, which I think opens with him throwing Blofeld into a vat of lava or something. So
that sounds pretty good.
Yeah. And then you find out later Blofeld was just like a mannequin or something. I don't know. It's weird. I haven't seen that one. But anyway, this one's really good. And George Lazenby, if nothing else, it is kind of fascinating because he doesn't play Bond like anyone else has played Bond. He doesn't really feel that similar to anyone else. And so it's kind of interesting. I mean, he was an Australian model. He's not really an actor. So it is kind of fascinating. But it's a good movie. And it has the new James Bond theme that was written kind of for a one-off. It was not used past this movie, which I think is too bad. It's a really good theme. It's just kind of as good as it gets, with those couple of little question marks probably being that if there was a better James Bond in it, there's no way this wouldn't be number one. Which is why my number one is Casino Royale. It'll always be Casino Royale for me, because that's really what made me fall in love with the franchise. And I just think every time I return to it, that movie is really good. It's really solid. Daniel Craig, I think, gives the best performance of any Bond ever, just in that one movie. I think he is fantastic from start to finish in it, bringing a kind of gravitas and humanity that James Bond had never had, in a story that brings those things to a level that James Bond had never had, while also being insanely stylish and sexy and fun and funny, and having some of the best action scenes. I still think that parkour chase at the beginning is some of the best stuff the series has ever done. Like, the way they shoot it, it kind of puts even the stuff Sam Mendes has done in his recent movies to shame, because it's like all these long shots where you can clearly see the stunt being done, you can see the scale. It is just so cool, and like there's not a hint of CGI in this thing, and not that there is in the other movies really either, but it's just, there's some, like, this movie is the one with the record for the longest car crash in any movie. The crash where he rolls after seeing Vesper Lind in the road, yeah. And Le Chiffre is a great bad guy, and this has the most harrowing torture sequence I've ever seen in a movie, because if you are a man, this will terrify you to the core of your being. Yeah. And if you are a woman, you probably get it too.
At a certain point, it doesn't matter what you have down there. Getting hit with a big balled up rope in your genital area is not pleasant for any gender of the species.
And this is what I mean when Daniel Craig has such a specific sense of humor in the role, that it becomes this really weird homoerotic scene where he's telling Le Chiffre to scratch his balls. It's great. Like, it's harrowing, but it's also very funny. This is just a fantastic movie, and yeah, I think it's the best James Bond movie.
It's a really fucking good movie.
It is. Without a doubt. So, all right, that is my list, ranking all the James Bond films. Probably a crazy task, but I did it. So, there you go. Sean, let's talk about something else that is really good.
All right.
Let's talk a little Doctor Who.
Doctor Who?
So, Sean, last week we talked about the Zygon Invasion, written by Peter Harness, part one of this story, and we talked about it for a while, but we kind of said, we have to wait for next week to really make a judgment on this one because it's so clearly part one.
Yeah, it's very much a longer 90-minute story split in half.
Yeah, which is fine. We just had to see. And finally, we have this week the Zygon Inversion, written by Peter Harness and Stephen Moffat. What did you think?
I thought it was great. It definitely, like, it completes the story fantastically. Like, it very much feels like it's an extension of what the Zygon Invasion did very well. But it also feels like, I mean, this whole conversation is going to really become about the last sort of 10 to 15 minutes of the episode, because the Doctor gives that massive speech, and really the whole story feels like once you get to that point, it's all building up to craft that scenario so that the Doctor can give that speech, and so that we can think about sort of the like blowing out the allegory sort of aspect. It's not really an allegory, but the allegorical sort of sheen that the episode had on blows that out into being something much more broader and being about war in general, as opposed to being more specifically about the sort of multiculturalist, smaller conflicts and ISIS kind of things that are going on specifically now, and becomes about the Doctor really exasperated, trying to really just broker peace for once, because he's never really managed to do it, and the whole story is really about that, and it becomes, I think, probably Peter Capaldi's finest turn in the role so far, which comes off of, like,
3 episodes in which we've said that?
Yeah, basically, where he has repeatedly had some of these, like, just some of the best moments any Doctor has had in the series. I mean, I still would go back to, like, The Girl Who Died and say, like, if this episode didn't exist, I would just say, okay, the girl who died in that scene with him either, like, translating the baby, or the scene with, like, going back to his face in his role in Fires of Pompeii, though that would be like the scene that when Peter Capaldi just leaves, that some, like, BBC intern, like, is taking a note that, like, when we're doing, like, the retrospective show for to air on, like, BBC 3 or whatever, we'll use this clip. Now that duty has shifted onto the end of this episode, where, like, they'll just have to fucking pull out the whole, like, 10-minute speech, because the whole scene is kind of unparalleled in a certain way in the history of Doctor Who.
Yeah, I was blown away by this episode. I finished it, and I was physically shaking. I was so energized and moved by what this episode does and what it builds to, and specifically what Peter Capaldi does, although you cannot discount Jenna Coleman playing 2 roles very crucially throughout this episode, and once again being this great duet partner for him. Or duet partners for each other. You can look at it either way. I just think, as you say, it's the build. I mean, we are going to talk about that. Basically, I timed it. It's just about 10 minutes, that speech. And that is the highlight of the episode, but it doesn't come in a vacuum. It does come from the build-up last week gave us, and what this week does. And I think all that stuff up to that point is still very entertaining and sharp. And I think this episode kicks it up to another notch almost immediately. I think the stuff with Clara in, like, the TV world is fantastic.
Yeah.
And how they do that interplay is really interesting. And I think all of the stuff on as the Doctor and Osgood are on their way to this confrontation is good, because they basically set up this really interesting sense of an impossible situation where we really do feel like we're on the brink of hopelessness and war. And then what does it come down to? It very organically comes down to the Doctor just trying to talk Bonnie, evil Clara, out of it.
Yeah.
And every time you think the scene is going to break, because conventionally she would just stop listening to him and hit a button, and then the Doctor would have to deal with that. And every time she's about to do it, he keeps talking, and he keeps going. And you don't even realize how long the scene is until you're done with it, and you're like, oh, I've been sitting here for 10 minutes. It just goes, and organically, through speech, takes us to this moment that is about forgiveness, and is about grace in some sense, and is about the Doctor kind of getting someone to see his cosmic perspective and being bettered through it, which is so much of it. Really does feel like the core philosophy of the show in a lot of ways, finally touching a villain and him talking down a villain in a way, at least in episodes of Doctor Who I've never seen, or at least seen done this well.
Yeah. And
it is so moving, and then the last couple minutes where we're wrapping that up are still coming off that high of that scene and are so beautiful in their own right. I think this is probably my favorite of the season so far. It is such a great story that is told through these 2 episodes, and it builds to simply one of the best scenes I've ever seen on television. And I will put it up against anything. It is just an all-time great hour of TV, and particularly an all-time great 15 minutes of TV, with a performance that just people aren't paying enough attention to, because Peter Capaldi is kind of towering over everyone else on television right now for me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is a really remarkable moment, because it is... I feel like it's... And it does come coupled with, like, the moments in The Girl Who Died and other parts of the season, like the second part of Which is Familiar, that one.
Yeah.
Like, we have seen this aspect of Peter Capaldi's Doctor, of his sort of exasperation and his sort of vulnerability and his honesty with these things, and his sort of desire to just kind of confront these issues without that sort of, like, deception and manipulation that, like... that aspect that the Doctor has, where he really hides himself so much of the time, and you're getting more of him just kind of being out there and really just saying what he's thinking. And there is a couple of shots at the end of that speech where it's just like he looks like the oldest person ever, like, and not in like insulting kind of way, but just like he's so wizened, and it's just he's so tired of having to do this so much, and his face just like transforms, and it's like I feel like I look at him differently now after that, like him as a person, and also the Doctor, his sort of interpretation of the Doctor, kind of differently because of like that transformation he has of just like putting it all out there, and not just like there's a lot of sort of Time War stuff that gets thrown into it too, but even it's just you feel the weight of the character so much of. Like, he's been in this scenario so many times, like, and I've watched it literally hundreds of times. He has been in this scenario with humans and some alien species together, where he is trying to get it to work out peacefully, and it always breaks down, and people die, and like a species maybe goes like completely extinct or something in the worst case scenario. This happens all the fucking time, and he's always trying to resolve it peacefully, and he never fucking can quite do it. And so this time, you know, the Time War thing in particular does like put a like harsh point on it when he has that moment and referring specifically to it, but also just his whole life of trying to get people just sit down and fucking talk for once. And like him finally being able to do it, there's a incredibly profound catharsis through that moment for the character and for the audience.
Absolutely, and you mentioned, you know, in those final shots where you see his face so close up, and he looks wizened and old and all those things. But what affects me the most in this entire episode and in that scene is the smile.
Yeah,
because we don't build to anger, we don't build to hatred, we don't build to scolding. That's part of the process. But what we ultimately build to is this warm smile where he said literally all he can say to Bonnie. And all he needs to let her know is that I am honest, and I see something in you that I see in me, and it's okay. It's okay to feel these things because I've felt them too, and you have a place. And I think that, and so the smile says more than any of the words. And this is a beautifully written monologue. It is one of the best pieces of writing I've ever seen. In like filmed media. It just is brilliant. And I just think the progression of it is so good, and the step by step by step, and how much they trust this actor to deliver. But ultimately, what is it about? It's about that little smile and saying, yes, there is forgiveness, and yes, there is something more beyond these emotions you have. And it's kind of the thing that puts such a fine point on what this whole episode is about, which is that war and hatred and all these things that Bonnie and Kate and the Doctor are going through or have gone through are fundamental human emotions.
Yeah.
And they're fundamental flaws within ourselves. But they are irrational flaws, and they are, you know, things we need to rid ourselves of. But how do we do that? And really it is only through that kind of action, which is that it's okay to have felt this way. Now let's find something greater.
Yeah.
And that is a point that, if it is not delivered well, can be cheesy, and it can be wrong-headed, and it can be oversimplified, and I don't think it is in this episode. I think they build to it so organically, and that is such a challenge, and that is why I like regard this as a piece of writing so highly, because it is dealing with ideas that are so hard to talk about.
Yeah.
And it does it so well.
Yeah, and it is like you get that, like you say, you get that smile and that close-up, and there is this aspect of, like, I just feel, and this is partially, like, I've been thinking about, like, old Doctor Who, because I've recently rewatched some of William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton stuff kind of on a whim, And I'm thinking again about like the Doctor as a grandfather, because that's such a huge part of the William Hartnell run, obviously, because you have fucking his granddaughter Susan there. Who someday we will have to figure out what the fuck all that shit's about. Someday we will find out why the fuck he leaves Susan on Earth. It's like, it's such a weird point in the show's continuity. But you get that, like, I mean, and he has the, like, Peter Capaldi's interpretation of the Doctor has always had this sort of fatherly quality with him, particularly with Clara, and how that, like, the age of the actors, obviously, sort of like with Matt Smith to Peter Capaldi, transitions that very naturally. But here you do get that sort of grandfather sense of where he is being very harsh, he's being very strict, and he is angry, and then... But he's angry because, like, he's trying to do, like help these people, and they're not... And they are acting like spoiled children.
Yeah.
And then when they, like, finally sort of, like, give in... It's like he gets to be like the kind, caring grandfather figure again, and he gets to have that smile.
I definitely saw a lot of William Hartnell in this one, and a lot of the early Doctors. I also saw some John Pertwee. I definitely saw some Patrick Troughton. I feel like he, in that speech, at one point just goes through all the Doctors. You can see all of them doing it. But I do, like, in some of the William Hartnell episodes I've seen, you get those kind of turns where he has to be frustrated with these stupid humans, but then he can also be incredibly warm, which is why he is the lovable figure he is.
Yeah.
And I love that you can... I just do think it is so remarkable that in Doctor Who you can trace that arc over 50-plus years now, and through all the ups and downs and twists and turns, there is something organic about that progression, where this moment matters not just because of this two-part story, but because of this 800 and some odd episode adventure.
Yeah, yeah. And then it definitely, it's heightened by the inclusion of Unit, because this is very, like, this whole story with Zygon Invasion and Inversion very much works out of a, like, Third Doctor Unit, like, Invasion of Earth story. I mean, like, every era of Doctor Who has had these kinds of stories, but the Third Doctor era is kind of specialized in them, is very famous for them. And having Kate Stewart be there, and never, like, having the presence of the Brigadier, like, never overshadowing anything. I mean, they don't refer to him explicitly, but there's something, like, very emotional for me in that scene of having Kate, the Brigadier's daughter, there, and sort of like having her be a filter for the Brigadier and kind of a stand-in, because obviously you can't have him because Nicholas Courtney passed away. But there is, they have like that very specific reference where she says 5 rounds rapid after killing the Zygon in what is like the most predictable but still incredibly satisfying satisfaction of that cliffhanger of like, well, because I rewatched Invasion right before Inversion, and I was at that scene, I was like thinking about, well, obviously Kate's not going to be dead. What would she do? I mean, she would just fucking shoot it. Like, she would just shoot the Zygon, and that's all she does. She shoots the Zygon and gives the 5 rounds rapid line, which is a Brigadier line from the Demons, I believe. And so you build that connection, and I was just like, in my head, like, the Brigadier has always been the figure in Doctor Who he is the guy who he, like, after the Doctor's trying to broker this treaty with the Silurians and Doctor Who and the Silurians, the Brigadier is the one who orders, like, basically the bombardment that kills all the Silurians and buries them in the Earth again, because that's his job. He is the human. He's the military man. He is trying to protect Earth, and he's going to kill aliens and sometimes people to do it. And, like, that is sort of this very, like, rocky relationship he has with the Doctor, of these two men who respect each other tremendously and need each other in so many different scenarios, but also have completely different ways of going about solving these problems, and just the Doctor pleading to Kate, like just breaking down emotionally of like, you have to just do this for me. Like, you have no idea what you're doing. Listen to me. I have been through this. I have been through this war. I know what this does, and I know what this has done to me personally. And there is that echo of like the Brigadier for me, of just like closing the box and putting away his gun, of being like, I respect you so much, Doctor, that I will do this, even if, like, the military side of it is that, like, no, I shouldn't be closing the box. Like, I have to because it's you. Like, there was a really profound emotional connection for me personally, reaching into the show's history in that scene.
Absolutely, and I think it also just, in a more recent sense, I think this episode redeemed Kate in a lot of ways. Not that she's ever been a bad character, but just that I think she's been fairly one-note. We haven't had that level of complexity you get with the Brigadier, for instance.
Yeah.
And I think that came into the show in this episode. And it actually feels like, okay, all the times before where we felt like she was kind of one-dimensional, maybe we're building up to this moment where she becomes more than that. Because the Doctor is asking, he's saying there is something more than that. And she finally puts her trust in him.
Yeah.
And it's true. And in that moment, she just seems more interesting. But, one of the things I love about that whole speech as we get into it is, watching it again, at the end that the boxes are empty. The Doctor has not actually put in these horrible
obviously,
faces.
he would never...
No.
Yeah.
But you can understand why they would believe it.
Oh, yeah, because they're, blinded by the desire to win this war. Yeah.
And the Doctor has this legend around him and all those things. So, what I love, though, is that the stakes of the scene are not life and death.
Yeah.
Because the Doctor knows they're not actually going to set off a nuke. And so the stakes are whether or not he can get these two people who are, diametrically opposed to come around to his way of thinking, not out of an egomaniacal way, but just because he feels like the world would be a better place if people saw what he sees, which is so obvious to him, but it is not obvious to people with this human scale perspective of the stupidity of war and of this kind of infighting.
Yeah.
And as he says, this is a scale model of war where you do all this until you finally get back to this point that you always had to do from the beginning, which is sitting at a table and talking.
Yeah.
And he just wants to know if he can see the forgiveness he's always wanted for himself, if he can get these other people to accept it.
Yeah.
And Kate does it, and he says, and I love the way he says, thank you to her. And then he gets Bonnie to accept it. And I love that. I love that the stakes are, ultimately, we have this big invasion story, and what are the stakes? The stakes is just kind of a simple matter of perspective and belief.
Yeah.
And that is so profound in so many ways, and is such a great inversion, as the title would tell us, of how I think we think of Doctor Who tropes, and of just sci-fi tropes in general, which is that, of course, it has to be life and death.
Yeah.
But sci-fi usually is thematically not necessarily about that. It's about the actual ideas and the issues. And this is a sci-fi story that starts life and death in that very typical way, and the subtext just becomes the text at a certain point, very organically and very powerfully. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also in that scene, because I guess it would have been kind of shortly before this season, I rewatched the 50th anniversary special, and it's really interesting to go back and watch Matt Smith era Clara, because it's your relationship to that character has changed so much, and I had forgotten, and this episode ties it in so much to that moment when they're going to activate the moment and destroy Gallifrey, and then Clara is crying and basically stops them and convinces Matt Smith or the 11th Doctor to sort of find another way and find a better way. And in the moment when when it aired, I felt like that moment was odd because it's not, his relationship with Clara was only half a season long and it didn't feel completely earned to me. Whereas now, and it's a weird retroactive thing because obviously that relationship isn't earned with the literal chronology, but my relationship to the character is such that her relationship with the 12th Doctor is so intense and profound and so closely linked. It's in kind of more than I feel kind of any New Who companion has really done for me. That moment feels so earned, weirdly retroactively, and I like how this ties that back into it at the end of the speech when he says there was another box, I was going to press another button, and it was Clara and Clara's sort of faith in who the Doctor is and what the Doctor stands for that keeps him faithful. And I like that even though Clara isn't in this episode a whole lot as Clara, because it's mostly evil Clara and Bonnie, but you do get I feel you get this valuable new perspective on their relationship, and I never quite grasped how grateful the Doctor is to Clara, because Clara is the one who kept him from doing that, and is the one who forgives him, basically. And it recolors their relationship for me slightly.
It's great, because you have a show where time is not a line, it's a plane.
Yeah.
And so when time is a plane that you can explore geographically that way, the show can kind of do it too in a weird way.
Yeah.
As you say, because, I have not watched the 50th special since it aired, so I actually did not remember whether Clara was directly responsible for that or not.
Yeah.
I was going to go back and check, and I just hadn't yet. But I like that. I can totally buy that, and I don't think it's a cheat on the show either.
Yeah.
I think that totally makes sense, because you can kind of read into that, because I think even in the moment, while that Clara was not done well right at the beginning, she was there for enough significant moments that you can conceivably build a more important character on that foundation, which they've done. So, yeah. Let's talk for a moment. I mean, Peter Capaldi, brilliant.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about him later, too, I'm sure. But Jenna Coleman as Bonnie is so good, and you think at the end of last week and throughout this week until you get to the big scene that she's just kind of having fun. That this is her being fun, evil Clara, and she does have a lot of fun with it. She is so good. But then you get to that table, and she is doing something so much more to that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, because we mentioned last week the Second Doctor story, The Enemy of the World, where Patrick Troughton gets to play himself. Salamander. And there is no real deeper gear to Salamander. He is just a villain, and Patrick Troughton plays him beautifully.
Yes.
But it is a great serial if you've never watched it. It's really fun. For more reasons than just that, but primarily because Salamander is so great. But here it's like Clara gets to do that and then really turn Bonnie into a character, and you can just see the vulnerability underlying all of that.
Yeah, and she does such a fantastic job where you just forget so quickly that it's the same actress. Like it's obviously it looks like Clara, but she so completely embodies a completely different character that even like, and then it helps a lot when you have like actual Clara there a little bit to contrast them. But yeah, she like the effect is kind of completely seamless. Like I never was like thinking, oh, like this is Jenna Louise Coleman is playing this character. She also plays Clara. It's like no, like they're just completely different characters in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think I want to, praise again. I think some of the stuff early on where Jenna Coleman is in that kind of netherworld and she's got the TV, and she finds she has this link between herself and her Zygon self. That was all really creatively done, and I think made for some fun, tense moments. And again, you completely forget that she's having a standoff with herself. It's just two characters having a standoff.
Yeah. It's a really great opening with her in like that dream world and stuff.
Yeah. A lot of good stuff there. And then I think the stuff with the Doctor and Osgood is fun. Osgood continues to just keep being fleshed out until she walks away from this story as one of the best characters out there in the extended Doctor Who universe. Yeah. And I would not have said that from prior Osgood stories, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time they ever really used her as a character, and obviously she's, like, the nature of her here is so different from, like, she feels like a different character very naturally through, like, story reasons, but just, like, it's a very different kind of character here, and but she's great.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of liked the actress because she was kind of plucky and fun. Yeah. But, it turns out you give her the material, she could go to another gear and was a real kind of rock to the story, I think.
Yeah, and a nice sort of, like, pseudo-companion for the Doctor since, like, he can't, like, Clara's not there. It was fun to have the 12th Doctor, like, very briefly kind of have another companion. It reminded me a bit of The Woman Who Lived, where you just get to see Peter Capaldi in his interpretation of the Doctor in a different scenario than you're used to for him.
Actually does give me a lot of hope for when Jenna Coleman leaves. I think he can kind of make chemistry with anyone, I'm thinking. Yeah, but one other thing I want to say about Osgood, because you get that whole speech, and it's beautiful, and it's heavy, and you're not laughing, you're just kind of forgetting to breathe. It's so breathless in how it's done. Yeah. And then they get out, and that's finally done, and they go back to the TARDIS, and one of my favorite jokes in the entire run of the 12th Doctor so far comes, where Osgood asks, what does TARDIS stand for? He says, you don't know? You of all people? Yeah. And Osgood's like, well, you've had multiple explanations, which is an in-joke, obviously. Sure, yeah. But then he says, well, it stands for totally awesome and rad, or what is it? It's like,
I think totally awesome and rad driving in space. I'm
yes, that's it.
Yeah.
And I laughed so hard, I was worried you were going to think I had a heart attack in the next room or something.
It's a good line.
And he just throws it out there like he could be totally serious. I don't know.
Yeah, because the time in relative dimension in space is not a satisfactory I mean, it's very obvious that they came up with the word TARDIS and then figured out how to make initials out of it instead of the other way around.
I just also like the idea that the Doctor could very conceivably have just forgotten what it stands for and made another acronym. And I think the 12th Doctor would absolutely make that acronym.
Yes.
It's so in character. And then I think it is really great where you have Bonnie become the new second Osgood. Yeah. And then they kind of go off together. And I like that this story ends with them kind of walking off together to go get ice cream. That just is like a wonderfully nice... It kind of summarizes what the theme of the episode was. Yeah. It's a great little grace note to finish on. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get another, again, a lot like The Woman Who Lived, where the Doctor and Clara are not like together basically at all for the entire episode. You get like a little tiny moment with them in the TARDIS together at the end, and it's another little building block where you're like, the end of this season is going to break my fucking heart, isn't it? Because it's like every time these characters are together and get to have these small intimate moments, it's like you realize how big their relationship has become and how well developed it is, and how much I love seeing these characters together. That like that's gonna that's going to hurt when that breaks apart.
But thank God Jenna Coleman stuck around.
Yes,
Because, they thought she might leave at the end of Series 8. Then she did the Christmas special, and Stephen Moffat wrote a draft of that where she did leave. And thank God she decided to stick around. And I wonder if it was just Stephen Moffat pleading with her, like, please, we have stories to tell.
Yeah.
We can do more. And they have, and I think they've done right by her, and she obviously has continued to do right by the show. Not that she ever would stop doing that.
Yeah.
But, I am so excited to see where they take the story, and I'm also bracing myself because this one is just, it's gonna hurt no matter how they do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this, season of Doctor Who has, gotten me to kind of tear up multiple times. I teared up at that, last speech. I teared up in The Girl Who Died. It's if I've never, full-on cried because of some, a movie or TV show or anything I've seen, this might be the thing that does it. This might be the thing that thaws my ice-cold heart,
It is amazing. It is just amazing. And, he has a great line there at the end where she says, what did you think when you thought I was dead? And he says, longest month of my life. And she was kind of joking.
Yeah.
And he's being completely serious. And she says, she thinks he's kind of joking. She's like, well, what do you mean? It was only 5 minutes. And he says, I'll be the judge of time.
Yeah.
And I love that. That is such a great just note to end on.
Yeah. Pull a lever.
Yeah. Because you can you know where he is, which is that he knows no matter what, there will come a day when she's not there. And she could live a long and natural life. She could be totally happy. It could be nothing bad that happens to her. But this one will hurt no matter what.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at. Because I don't necessarily even expect it'll be a tragic ending. I think they could do what Moffat's plan in Last Christmas was, which is just she dies of old age or something.
Yeah.
But either way, it's going to hurt because we have been so ingrained into the Doctor's cosmic perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing to talk about with this episode is that, as we said last week, and you kind of hinted at the beginning of this discussion, this seemed like it was an episode of Doctor Who and a Doctor Who story that was kind of being more of a parable. It was being more analogous to things in the real world, like ISIS and religious conflict and those things. But then it really does come back to the cosmic perspective, which is that, look, these are not new problems. You are not coming up with new things to be mad at each other about. So shut the fuck up and listen, because I have this larger perspective. And in that way, it is such a pure Doctor Who story to me, because it ultimately comes back to the same point most Doctor Who stories, or good Doctor Who stories, are about, which is these larger questions of what it is to live and to be alive and have to deal with emotion. Anything that is a part of that cosmic perspective.
Yeah. It is, although, I guess now I want to transition to something that's a kind of a hard thing to talk about because it's something I haven't fully figured out, but it is, I guess, my biggest criticism of the episode. But it's not a criticism in that I think it's bad, because I just think it's this is kind of something almost impossible to do. But the issues that are at issue here, specifically, I think it's the multicultural aspect of it, of that they don't, I guess they shy away from something that is really hard to talk about, and I understandably they shy away from it to make it more globally just about war. But they kind of lose track of the Zygon motivation, which was for them to be able to be themselves. And that's not really present. And while I do really love the speech at the end, and I think it's great, part of me wishes that there was something more sort of dialectic about it, and that you don't really get a strong argument on the other side for why the Zygons are really doing what they're doing. And there are a lot of instances of conflict that I would completely agree with the Doctor's perspective, and when Bonnie basically says we want war, that does happen. But I do think there is, and it's partially because it's a British show, and it makes me think about British imperialism. There is a way to read this episode that is very much a British imperialist perspective of shutting down other cultures that you have colonized, to say that's well, no, listen, I know what's right. And it's you to kind of homogenize things. And it's I'm not saying that's what this episode is saying and that's what it's doing, but it broaches some of those topics, and since it's so hard to do, it's not able to shut them down entirely. And I don't think this episode has some sort of there are difficulties presented throughout the episode that are not resolved by the ending, and that should not be, because the Zygon situation is not fixed. It can't be fixed. But I do wish that there was something a little more sort of there to talk about why the Zygons are doing this, why they want to be able to be themselves, and having, like I said, more of a dialectic representation of that argument than just the giant soliloquy, even though the giant soliloquy is incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And in fact, the one thing I do think is missing is that, okay, so you have this part early in the soliloquy where she does kind of list all the things she doesn't like about their situation of having to live underground and not be themselves. Yeah. And he says, I don't get to do what I want to do. And he lists all these things. And I think that's the start of an important part of the conversation, which is that peace and living together just means compromise. It does mean that no one can be their perfect self and do what they want. And that's the start of something. What it needed to follow through on is, I would hope, like at the end of the soliloquy, when all was said and done, I just wanted to hear Peter Capaldi say, what can I do to help you? Like, let's not do war, but let's find something else.
Yeah, exactly.
I could relocate you, we could talk to the humans, but something to just say that, and I think it's implied in that smile and all of that, that I'm here for you, but I think it just needed to be verbalized, because that would basically erase a lot of what you're saying there as a criticism. If it were just, because obviously it is important that they not do war, because they are going about this the wrong way.
Yes, yeah.
But there is something valid in what Bonnie's saying, and I don't think there's any point where we're meant to think she's 100% invalid.
Yeah.
Because, again, he does broach the topic at the beginning, and it's all about ultimately coming back to, look, I've been here, I've done this. But yeah, I do think there's maybe just a line missing. And again, that's not like a negative criticism, because I can't imagine many topics that are harder to write about than this, and harder to write about and get it so right. That they get this 99% right instead of 100, that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's also more like there are a lot of different ways to try to do this, and they picked one way, and I think the way they picked was great, and probably the right way for Doctor Who, but like you do, when you broach these kind of topics, it makes you sort of like kind of hunger to have those other perspectives represented more fully. And like there are like actually examples in the history of Doctor Who where it has kind of gone the other way, where you have like the sort of the minority culture more defended and him fighting for them. And it's like, and it's a, like I said, it's an incredibly complex issue that they find one way to tackle it. And I do wish there was maybe some more lip service to the other ways that you could have tackled it, I suppose.
Yeah. But if anything, that we can talk about that as an issue is, at the end of the day, only kind of a praise to the episode. That it's bold enough to broach all of that and then tackle it in a way that is mostly correct, if not 100%, because there's no perfect way to do this.
Yeah, it depends on your perspective of what you're looking for and what you want out of like this episode and that scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I mean, there's just the arc of that soliloquy, though, where it starts and he's just kind of making fun of them.
Yeah.
And then he's getting a little angrier. And then he's explaining, he's exasperated. And then he just breaks down and is talking about the Time War. And you feel like Peter Capaldi isn't reading lines. These are just words that are coming up from the core of his being, shouting about, all the faces, more screams than any person can remember or count. And he makes the fist. He's like, you take it in your fist and you feel the burn and all that. And good God, it is powerful.
Yeah, it's an incredible moment, for sure.
Peter Capaldi is the man.
He is super fucking cool.
Just so good. Just, you and I were talking about this off the air yesterday after we saw the episode. It just, this season is just kind of mind-blowing as a Doctor Who fan of any length of time. Whether you've seen 800 of these or 10 years in modern Who now, this is just kind of singular, the run they've been having.
Yeah. It's like, because it's not just, it's like all of them are good. It's like, they're all really good. Like, in other seasons, any of these two-parters could be, like, the best story out of that season. Like, they are all of that caliber, I feel.
The weakest story of this season so far is the best one Stephen Moffat has written in years.
Yes, yeah.
Just to put it in perspective, that is an incredible feat,
Yeah.
Because Stephen Moffat's a good writer, and when he's on, like he is in The Magician's Apprentice, he's really on.
Yeah.
And that's still not quite as strong as the next three stories, which have been just super.
Yeah.
And I feel like each one, in some ways, to me, has been even more powerful than the one that came before, because they are subtly building on each other, I do
think. It is definitely, like, and it is, I'm really curious to see what the season finale is going to be like, because this is something else we talked about before we were recording this podcast, of that the one thing that Stephen Moffat has not nailed since season 5, and actually really, like, New Who has never really gotten right other than season 5, and maybe kind of season 1, like half season 1, is the season finale thing. Like, the season finales have always been either, like, just kind of okay, or in the case of, like, how the Master one ended in season 3 and stuff, or the Wedding of River Song, just kind of, like, insulting in some ways, just, like, being incredibly convoluted or just insanely stupid. And so I'm curious to see how this season is going to wrap up, and I have a lot of faith that it's going to wrap up really well because, like you said, this season has been building itself very subtly, and it's not, you don't have something like Bad Wolf. I mean, you have like the mentions of Hybrid, but that's like really small and feels more like, less like the showrunner like injecting Bad Wolf into every single episode meaninglessly, and more like the Doctor is thinking about the idea of Hybrid because of stuff that came up in the season opener, and so when someone mentions the word Hybrid, he kind of thinks about it for half a second, and that's all it is. It's not like...
Well, it kind of feels like Stephen Moffat looked at the scripts he was getting and then noticed this common theme of species coming together or something, or hybridization, and said, maybe we can make this a theme.
Yeah.
Which is the right way to do it.
Yeah, and not just like, well, I would like to tell the set designer to write the word Bad Wolf on this wall because that's not going to mean anything significant at any point, but we're going to do it anyway. Or like have someone randomly say the word Torchwood at the end of the episode, like in the middle of nowhere. It's like, yeah, it's a very subtle build, and it's also very different from what Series 8 did, where Series 8, well, we both loved it a lot, and I think it did this well. It had like very clear, defined character arcs that it was doing with Clara and Danny and the Doctor to build like that, and then didn't nail the landing, but I guess the conclusion did. I think it nailed the important parts of the character arcs pretty well. So if this is going very differently, if it's not doing the blatant character arcs, it's just very slowly building up pieces, sort of like altering the tone of the Dr. Clara relationship and sort of like showing how tight they are and how catastrophic it will be if that has some sort of tragic ending, and seeding little ideas of hybridization across the different stories. But that's kind of it.
And I think you can easily do a finale out of all of that.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like there's too much to deal with. It feels like there's kind of the right amount.
Yeah, exactly, because that has always been the biggest problem. Even when, like, Season 5, which was really, really good, still, like, the couple of problems it has is that it is, like, very busy at the very end.
I mean, again, the biggest thing that happens they don't explain within that season.
Exactly, and, like, you're just... The seasons, like The Wedding of River Song, is like the ultimate example of way too much stuff to try to deal with, and just jamming everything in there until parts of the episode are practically incomprehensible. Just because it's like there's no way to make sense of all the stuff that's going on. You're just editing and moving into different scenes so fastly, and nothing's allowed to breathe. That it feels like it is building to a natural conclusion that, you know, hopefully is going to absolutely nail it. And if it does, like, this will be hands down the best season in the history of Doctor Who. Like, fuck just talking about New Who. Like, we were talking about going back to, like, the golden years of Tom Baker and being like, this is, like, as good as one of those seasons, if not better. You know?
And I never thought I would hear you say that.
Yeah. I mean, this is really phenomenally good. Like, it is on that scale.
No, I get
without
it.
a doubt to me. Yeah.
It's amazing. And... you know, knowing what I know about the finale just from little things I've heard, like, it's Stephen Moffat is doing 2 episodes at the end. I'm not sure how they're related.
Yeah.
One half is very conceptual from what it sounds like, which actually sounds good because maybe it's just him getting to write an episode.
Yeah.
And then the other half, there's also just a confidence to this that I don't feel when I hear people yelling Doctor Who or writing Bad Wolf on the wall. Like, it feels like, if anything, Stephen Moffat, and maybe we'll sound like idiots in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, hopefully
but all I'm saying is that, like, it feels like in prior cases where there was not a satisfying finale, everything seeding that was overcompensating. And this time it feels like maybe he doesn't have to do that because he's just that confident in the ending he has planned.
Yeah.
Which I would hope is the case.
Yeah, that you don't need to, like, signal the season finale with, like, a big fucking gong every single episode.
Right.
It's just, like, it's just going to be a natural capper to the things that this season has talked about, and that's all it has to be, and it's mostly just going to be its own story, which is what I hope it is.
And, you know, I also have some faith just that the premiere also was much lighter on continuity than Stephen Moffat likes to be. He just basically told a story that was kicking things off. It is a premiere. It had to get some things out there, but, you know. And, like, it makes me feel good that we haven't heard, like, Michelle Gomez is coming back for the finale or something. Not because I dislike her, but just because that would feel like too much. And I think that if she was in it, I'm pretty sure we would have heard.
Yeah.
So,
well, I know Michelle Gomez is going to come back, and Davros is going to come back, and obviously Clara is going to be the Ronnie the whole time, and Omega is going to come out of, like, the negative universe or whatever, and he's going to invade our universe again. Obviously, that's everything that's been planned. If you've been paying attention, Jonathan, reading the subtext, that's obviously what's going to happen. And it's all going to be the Doctor's going to land back on the web planet, and it's going to be the Zarbi are behind all of it. I'm sure. I'm 100% sure this time.
All I know is, Doctor Who has its ups and downs. It's never unredeemable as a whole, but sometimes it's also, you have years where you're like, this isn't completely rewarding my faith.
Yeah, every once in a while you get a season 7 or a season 2 and you're like, ooh.
Yeah. But you get to this one and it's like, good God, this is like heaven for a fan of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Because there have been a lot of disappointments lately. Metal Gear Solid 5, Halo 5, Spectre. We could keep going. But Doctor Who has kind of been this rock this fall, and it's been so awesome.
Yeah, if Doctor Who has a good year, then that's just a good year in my book.
Absolutely. All right, well, we'll be back next week talking about Fallout 4, Rise of the Tomb Raider, more hopefully awesome Doctor Who, and lots of other stuff. So follow us on Tumblr at theweeklystuff.tumblr.com, or go to jonathanlack.com, where you can still read Sean's written review of Halo 5 if you haven't done that yet. He hasn't done a written review of a game like this before. It's good. I would recommend it.
Thank you, Jonathan.
No,
I
really
certainly enjoyed it.
Yes. So, that's that.
Until next time.